Yes.
MJ, quick question. Before
Hi
we go
guys, we are live.
God damn it!
We've never started well ever.
No.
It's okay.
Listen to your guests.
It's
Type it in
okay,
the
guys. How's everybody
just ask
doing?
the question anyway.
How's everybody doing? Welcome to SEAL Team 7. This is probably the most exciting episode we've had since ever, right? Because we had some big stuff happen Thursday. I'm still reeling. I'm still excited. We're going to talk about it. But without further ado, I'm going to do some introductions. We're going to start with my good friend, Sleepezi, who's going to tell us what he is, why he is, who he is, what he ships. Go.
All the answers above are Genesis. I'm Sleepezi. I am a content creator on YouTube who does Final Fantasy VII lore deep dives. The last video I posted was a 3-hour romp of Remake. It is a deep dive into all sorts of sort of not conclusive thoughts about like my final thoughts about Remake, but some of the more outstanding elements of the bigger mysteries, right? So Sephiroth, Whispers, Genova's influence, and also a lot of questions about Zack that I attempt to answer in that, which I find all of those discussions very relevant to the recent release of Rebirth. Currently, I'm working on 2 videos. I was working on one for you guys before the announcement, and now I am working on a new Rebirth video, so expect the Rebirth video before the one that I was already planning on releasing, one being on just Rebirth and one being more on some of my own personal interests when it comes to Remake's lore and the lore of the compilation. That's me. That's Sleepezi. I'm your good friend.
That's you. Yeah, come on.
You did good friend? That's so sweet of you.
You're welcome. Speaking of good friends, I'd like to introduce you, if you don't already know, you should, to my good friend, MJ Gallagher, who is a now renowned author. And you can catch some of our talks on his YouTube channel, but he's got a bunch of stuff brewing up. Why don't you tell us about it, MJ?
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm absolutely delighted to be back. It feels like SEAL Team 7 has been, my go-to thing for podcasts for the last couple of years. So to actually be back on it is just, yeah, I've missed this. I've missed speaking with Sleepezi. Obviously, you and I speak on a regular basis. And it's great to be able to meet Kai as well. So just for those of you who are not aware of what I do, I've spent a lot of time in the past sort of researching Final Fantasy VII lore in the context of writing sort of fan fiction, which then developed into writing a book that explored Norse mythology that inspired Final Fantasy VII, which it kind of released shortly after Remake, and it just kind of took off a little bit. So I think a lot of people who know me online nowadays will be through that book, and that's how effectively Baby Seal and Sleepezi and I got speaking in the first place. I ran a Kickstarter about 6 months ago for the follow-up title, which is Greek Myths, that inspired Final Fantasy VII. So the crowdfund went pretty well with that one. And off the back of it, Clark and I have been doing a podcast, which sort of is like a behind-the-scenes kind of idea where we just throw ideas around. So that's currently on my YouTube channel just now. Norse Myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII is available, basically on Amazon for want of anywhere else, but you can order it through Barnes & Noble and things like that as well. It's available in paperback, digital, and there's an audiobook as well that's been read by Liam Mulvey, who is Libertus in the Final Fantasy 15 universe. So Liam did an amazing job on that. Thoroughly delighted with how it came out. The Greek myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII will be out later this year. I'm not able to give a sort of definitive timeline for that just yet, but I will in coming months. And there's some content that's I've already released as a kind of preview for that. So if anyone's interested, you'll be able to find that through my Patreon, which is just patreon.com/MJ Gallagher. Links to all my works, fan fiction, etc. Is all in there. One of the other main projects that I've been working on just now is with KupoCon. KupoCon commissioned me to do a Final Fantasy VII Remake breakdown series, which I've been working my way through. I'm just about, and by this point actually we're days away from releasing the final episode, which is going to be more than an hour long, covering chapter 8 of that. So that will actually be episode 32 of the series, and it's going to be an absolute monster. But that's getting released to, basically off the back of everything that's happened this week. KupoCon have got some big stuff coming up, so it's still lovely to be part of that. But yeah, again, if anyone's interested in finding out about everything that I've been up to, all the links are just on a kind of pinned post on my Patreon. So do check me out there, or alternatively, come say hi on Twitter at FFVII Novels. Specifically VII, not FF7 Novels. That's somebody totally different. But please do come and say hi.
Yes. Totally different. Okay, well, hey, thanks a ton, MJ. And for the first time ever, we're going to introduce Kai Loomis, who, if you follow me on Twitter or have listened to anything that I've ever said regarding the lore, a lot of it comes from the Shinra Archaeology Department, who has been compiling some of the most serious just lore. I mean, translations, we're talking about analysis. It's an absolute wellspring of data regarding the Final Fantasy VII universe that has been really critical to a lot of content that's been created, I think, in the last 6 months. And so one of the, we'll say, figureheads of that institution is here today. So Kai Loomis, why don't you tell us what it is you are up to these days? And at the end of your little introduction, you can share an announcement, and we will go live with something as soon as you do.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. I am Kai Loomis, Chief Director of the Shinra Archaeology Department of the Shinra Electric Power Company, and it's great to be here on this stream today. These days, I have been making sure that the public server is nice and ready. Some little things are a little dodgy, but we're working on it on the back end. The Ultimania Omega scanlations are coming along smoothly. Thank you so much, everybody in there. Really amazing work. I have not even had a chance to personally sit down and start analyzing Rebirth, Reunion, the newest First Soldier stuff. We all know where we're going to probably talk about where it comes to First Soldier. That last few seconds, oh boy. Especially once I talk about some of the stuff I translated ahead of time from the Crisis Core Complete Guide.
I'm excited.
Yes.
I'm excited for all this
That
stuff.
Is that I totally forgot about that, and I was like, oh, of course it is. Of course that is something that we got to bring up.
Yeah. So that might be the first thing we bring up. But so why don't you tell us about the server? And I've got a command ready for everybody who's here to join right now.
All right. So, as of today, Shinra Archaeology is going public with Shinra's Museum of Archaeology. Indeed. So now you can talk to us, the translators and staff and other lore heads, directly.
It's so cool. I'm so excited. This is such an awesome thing. So anybody who wants to, again, I'm just going to reiterate this, is that a lot of content creators, including myself, have gone to Kai, have gone to all of the people at Shinra Archaeology Department for the lore of Final Fantasy VII, the real information, the stuff that we all kind of spend our time looking at on my videos. All of that has been very meticulously cataloged and just is available through the Shinra Archaeology Department and the people that are involved in directly translating it. So, like all the Japanese books, all of that stuff, all of that is going to be
stuff. By the way, that's gone untranslated for ever. Like, it has never been translated until they got their hands on it, and it gives context. Yeah.
It was like 60. So, like, there's a Crisis Core book, and maybe you can clarify this, Kai, but there's an Ultimania or
the Complete
Crisis
Guide
Core book, Complete Guide, that was like only like 40% translated before you guys even like got
that
to
is
it.
Correct. That is correct.
That is insane.
Yeah.
That's
Tell
insane.
me about it.
Yeah.
it was less than half.
Yeah, it's so crazy, especially since Crisis Core is such a big deal and there's not any other information other than the 10th anniversary and sort of where it's mentioned before, other than this book. And man, I'll say this is that the last video that I did, like, all thanks to you guys in terms of like some of the stuff that you found, like all of the Zack information, all of the association with like memories stuff with that incident at the end of Crisis Core about Zack's memories and Cloud, and like just the profound information in there about like clearing up some of like maybe the longest, some of the biggest and heaviest debates in Final Fantasy VII lore. You guys found it, and you guys were so I want to say I was very I appreciated all of it. You let me use it in the video, and I did give it a shout out, but like I am seriously grateful for like all of that help, and not Kai in certain instances, and also other members of the Shinra Archaeology Department have literally been helping me make Sleepezi content for since I started. Like, if I had a question, these guys are always there to help me out, and that's why this server is so important. If you guys like this information, if you guys like doing the deep dive lore stuff, this is a place to answer questions, to really get into Final Fantasy VII into a bigger way if you're interested in that stuff. So please, let me just go ahead and grab the link for it.
And I do have that command. I'm not sure if you saw it.
No, I did not. Okay. What is the command? Oh, you did it.
Yeah.
Yes, join the Shinra Archaeology Discord.
Yes, there you go.
And I think for us content creators and analysts, like, we've been looking at a lot of this information for years, you know, from the livestream.net, and obviously what the Shinra Archives or Shinra Archaeology Department have done is gone far deeper, reproduced it in an amazing way. It's all now in this sort of fantastic catalogue. But it means then that everyone can delve into what we've been looking at for so long. And I think a lot of us, you know, we as content creators, we forget that people don't have access to a lot of this. So it's amazing that has become available. And yeah, I'm can't thank you enough. Okay.
Thank you so much. Honor is mine for you to share the work.
Well,
and you guys have a fun connection.
Yes, you guys do. The live stream, that's has quite the legacy, and it's there's a storied history to the live stream. I feel like a documentary could be done just on that
would
site.
Be cool, wouldn't
it? So okay, let's talk about it. We're on the heels of probably the most significant news we've had this year in terms of Final Fantasy VII. We had the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary stream, which was, was hinted at the beginning of the year, and the buzz started to build around it. But expectations were kind of, low going in, and then some things started to happen that made us feel like maybe this would be a bigger deal than we expected. One, the the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer dropped at the Kingdom Hearts anniversary celebration, which I don't think anybody expected something so significant. And the Kingdom Hearts celebration, the Final Fantasy 35th anniversary celebration, and the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary celebration were all announced at the same time. So it sort of opened the door for this possibility that the 25th anniversary would have something more significant than just celebration. We have been overdue for production information regarding Final Fantasy VII and the remake project. We knew from last year that there was going to be probably continued content for The First Soldier, which is a it's a mobile only shooter game, and that's not everybody's deal. There's been a couple seasons of that. We're now in season 3. None of the stuff has been particularly lore relevant, but it's been interesting nonetheless. Then we've had this promise of Ever Crisis, which Ever Crisis was sort of pitched in this way that made it seem like, hey, this is a way to experience the entire compilation on this, mobile device, but in sort of a turn-based fashion. It's not voice acted. Felt a little bit like, sort of the remake that some people wanted. It was called Another Chance for a Remake. But we're learning more and more that there's more to Ever Crisis. Ever Crisis will go through the entire compilation, and there will be some stories that are unique to Ever Crisis. We've got a Sephiroth origin story that was teased when Ever Crisis was first announced by Tetsuya Nomura, who teased that Nojima was penning a story about a certain soldier, and that story would be explored in Ever Crisis. And we got our first look at that. And then right about a week before, or actually only like 2 days before the actual 25th anniversary stream, we got this note that, hey, maybe you're going to get something surprising involving Crisis Core. And then when the 25th anniversary hit, we got The First Soldier, we got Ever Crisis, then we got, shockingly, the Crisis Core Reunion remake, which is it's a remaster technically, but it seems like perhaps there's a little bit more to that, and we'll talk about that here. And then finally, they ended the show with what we all really wanted, which was the sequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake, titled Rebirth. We got a minute and a half trailer. Very little was shown, but importantly, at the end of this trailer, which we will go into, was a release plan. We got a really solid release plan for the project. Afterwards, right alongside the event, there were 3 statements, one from Kitase, one from Nomura, and one from Hamaguchi, and all of them sort of confirm that next winter we're going to see Rebirth, and a third title probably not too far after, as the third title is already in development. So we got a plan, which was, I think, more than any of us expected. So the 25th anniversary was, sort of the highlight of the year for me. It was like somehow better than all the other non-E3 stuff that happened combined. So I'm pretty excited, guys. What was you guys' response to the anniversary stream? I'll ask Sleepezi, even though I was literally there.
Yeah, you were right next to me experiencing the whole thing. Like you kind of mentioned, I was not expecting a date. I was not expecting a Crisis Core remaster necessarily. I think some of the outgoing sort of tweets about a Crisis Core something was brewing at that point. So I wanted to see something along the lines of a remake, but I was also okay with a remastered kind of. My general hopes for the Crisis Core thing going into it was to see more of a final mix version of Crisis Core. and we got updated graphics, which I think are mod worthy. I'll say that. But cool. It's a very neat thing that they're even touching Crisis Core again, and it's a shot by for shot thing, which I thought was really crazy that they were sticking so closely to like the vibe of this game that is so particular. And it just blew my mind. I was like, you're keeping everything. You're keeping like the way it looks, like the camera angles, everything. It was surreal seeing Crisis Core. I couldn't even say anything. Like if like you go back, I'm just like sitting there looking at the screen, and I just am like a complete loss for words for what is actually happening. I can't make heads or tails of it. Reunions got me interested. I think that's the part I'm more interested in, is that maybe there is going to be something new to it, which we can talk about, because I have a lot of hopes for Reunion outside of it just being the same old Crisis Core that we got. Ever Crisis, I actually met exactly the level of expectations I wanted it to hit. Is that I wanted it to look decent. I wanted it to have that sort of consistent OG gameplay feel, which I was like, a lot of people were being like, oh, we're going to get a remix of like, you know, maybe some different styles of gameplay through different chapters. I was like, no, this is like going to be unified, all operate under the same sort of like design, gameplay design, and just the overworld feel, and like the rendered backgrounds is what I was so stoked for. I'm excited for that. I'm a little hesitant about like when that's going to come out. I really want that to come out at a good time, because we're about to get a lot of Final Fantasy, at least in terms of for me, because it's just a lot of research. And then First Soldier Sephiroth story reveal was cool. Again, just more of just like it exists, and that was exciting. And then surely there wasn't going to be part 2 news. That blew my mind. I think that was the biggest thing for me, is that before going into part 2 and the reveal of part 2, I think a lot of people were like, we're going to maybe like, we just are going to see Calm. We're going to see the Nibelheim incident. Like maybe they'll show off like the Midgar Zolom. We'll see all this stuff. And then they just knew. All they needed to show us was literally Cloud and Sephiroth walking next to each other on a set path, and then just to show us the Nibelheim mountains, the Mount Nibel shot. That at first I was just like shocked, and obviously like the Zack thing was a nice extra little bit to show, because it was like, here's something really familiar, the Nibelheim stuff, and then here's like the stuff that we want to kind of get a little bit of clarity on. So that it was just the right amount of information in the trailer to get us excited. And the thing is that it's not necessarily the initial reaction to the trailer that I've been enjoying. It's been just thinking about like, oh man, now I'm thinking about like going to Mount Nebel was like just like 3 screens, and then we're like in this, you know, in the story. But now it's like we're gonna be talking to Sephiroth for like 2 hours walking up this mountain, and I'm so stoked to just see all the character development, what happens in it. Obviously, there's a lot of questions, but we'll get more into that. But that was my initial reaction to the stream, was good. I am excited. There's a lot coming out all the time, and that's huge.
I didn't even think of that. The whole, you know, one of the big things for all of us when we first played Remake was the interaction between Cloud and Barrett at Mako Reactor 1. Just the throwaway comments. Like, we're now going to have something similar between Cloud and Sephiroth. Wow.
Yes.
That's not even crossed my mind until right now. Yeah. Wow, that's
it's gonna
amazing.
be like all of that. That's what I think is so cool about Remake is that you get those like little interactions. Like, the thing that always threw me off about the OG is that he's like, what's your mother's name? And he's like, Genova. And he's like, my childhood. And he just starts laughing. And then it's like, no, we're going to build into this now. We're going to like, he's going to talk about his childhood a little bit. And Cloud's going to be a little bit more Zack-like, maybe, asking some questions. So it's going to be awesome.
So what you're saying is that you're excited.
No.
Okay.
The opposite.
All right.
Totally deflated. 0 out of 10 event.
Okay.
Well, you've very poorly articulated that then.
Yes.
Mhm,
Yes.
thank you.
That's
I thought
his,
I made
that's his strong point.
That violin starts to play.
Mo, what was your response? How did you feel watching that?
I was, for the most part, really, really, really delighted. I think what was delivered was exactly what I hoped was going to be delivered. So there was I think because like 24 hours or 48 hours beforehand there was that leak about, there's big Crisis Core news coming. So I think that set a lot of us up for, okay, expect something big Crisis Core wise, and it was always going to be either a remaster or a remake. And I figured that a remake was going to be too much, so I was definitely in the remaster camp. But when I was thinking about how they're going to remaster it, it was more along the lines of just upscaling the original Crisis Core version, but not anywhere near the way that they've done it. Literally just kind of polish up the original. So I'm with Sleepezi. There's quite a lot of image refinement that's going to be required before release.
Yeah.
But it looks brilliant. There's a few things that we'll get into it when we're kind of talking about the Crisis Core reunion in particular. But there's a few things that definitely stood out about the direction that they were going. One of the big ones being, first of all, they've called it reunion, which straight away suggests that it's not quite going to be exactly how it played out before. Second of all, it's going to be released simultaneous to Ever Crisis, and Ever Crisis that actually looks like a remake of the original Crisis Core story. So to do both at the same time doesn't make sense. So on that alone, I would argue that reunion is actually going to change the story. In terms of Ever Crisis, I loved everything I saw about it. I'm not a big fan of the kind of concept of gacha gaming and whatnot, but for this, to actually play through this, I'll definitely pick up a copy of it. I really like the art style in it. It kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy IX a lot.
That's right.
I think that's really cool. And it looks as if, for the most part, they're sticking with kind of the details of the OG, like showing that President Shinra shows up on the bridge, or showing that it's only Reno they fight at the pillar.
Yes.
Shows that they're sticking to that. There was one deviation, and it was like the extra infantryman.
We'll talk about that.
And that seems so weird.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, definitely.
So we'll come back to that. And in terms of the First Soldier, obviously the Sephiroth bit of the First Soldier came with Ever Crisis. So for First Soldier itself, to the best of my knowledge, they'd already released that trailer. I'd already seen it.
Yes.
When it came out. So there's a couple of things. I still haven't played First Soldier. It's on my phone. It's ready to go. I just haven't got around to playing it. So I'm really interested now. I'm not big on battle games, but I'm really interested now that they've introduced this sort of free roaming mode.
Right.
So we can go.
Right.
So that looks cool. But there's so the name of it. This is something that I was kind of speaking about behind the scenes, right? So the whole concept of First Soldier is that it's obviously the volunteers or people who are looking to get into the soldier program. Very, very early days, and the soldier program is obviously to do with Genova and Genova cells, and so on and so forth. So, Sleepezi, are you familiar with the name of season 3?
No, I'm not. What is it?
It's Highway Star. Are you familiar with the song Highway Star?
I'm not familiar with the song Highway Star.
Highway Star is a song by Deep Purple.
Right.
No, it isn't.
Yeah,
Shut
it
up. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
So
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So it's a proper meta joke they've got in
Somebody get me in contact with somebody. That's too much. That is too much. So
There was also, just let's dial it back a little bit. Might be a coincidence. Highway Star is also was a very famous graphic novel, right? In the Japanese graphic novel manga,
Right.
Yeah. So.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. So that. Thanks for just ruining.
You're welcome.
Wow. Jeez.
That was so good.
Burst.
I can't. My smile is like permanent now for the rest of the stream.
It's either just a total fluke of a coincidence, or it's one of the best things they've done. But in terms of the rest of the 25th anniversary celebration, getting to see anything out of Remake Part 2 was just sensational, and it was one of those ones where, like, seeing Nibelheim in particular, or Mount Nibel, really took my breath away. I think
Me
that
too.
was probably my favourite part.
Me too. Yeah.
And I had to go back and watch the trailer quite a few times to really get to grips with what the content was and the context of it. And, can I actually shout out to your guys, Kai, for doing the Turquoise Hammer put out the translation, the Japanese trailer translation, which was really useful to see. Birds of Play did
a great one too.
An announcement, so that was amazing to see what the differences were, and it does actually provide a lot more context for some of the things we'll talk about later in the stream. So I was so happy, so happy with everything that was delivered.
That's excellent news. So I'm really excited to hear, Kai, how did you feel watching that anniversary stream? Was it everything you wanted and more?
I went into the stream with zero expectations. I was rare for me because I tend to be, let's call it hesitant when it comes to surprises in general. I just went into the stream going, okay, let's see what Square brings to the table. By the end of the stream, and okay, so for anybody who's in the live stream Discord server, they'll probably know that for big events like these, there's going to be like a group chat watching it all together. The best way you could describe my reaction towards the end was loud. I was cackling.
With so many people just screaming. Yeah. That's all I imagine now. It's just like all of the live stream at once just going.
The cries of the planet. That's what that is.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah.
Actually, most of the channel was kind of quiet. I was probably the loud one. They were. I mean, considering that Rebirth is more or less putting it out in front that, say goodbye to Kansas because we're going someplace completely different. Yeah. Which
I do have a question for you.
Yes.
I have a question for you specifically about that experience. Were all of them excited, or because you said some of them were silent? Do you think?
Oh, you mean with the rest of the server?
Or just in general, like with it?
I think it was a little bit of mix. Some of it was anticipation. Some of it was, hey, let's let it finish. Some of it is like, oh God, why? Especially, with how some people have been taken to like comments going, no, Final Fantasy VII is Cloud's game. Why are you doing this? No, stop.
Yeah, I can definitely get. I was just thinking because live stream is such it has a lot of different opinions about like what Remake is, how people feel about it, and sort of its effect on like the rest of it. So like as much as like all of the people that I have talked to and like even the people here, it seems like at least are like super stoked about, and our audience too is super stoked about Rebirth. It's such an interesting thing because I haven't seen most people respond negatively to it yet, but that could just be because I'm in my own like sort of bubble of Sleepezi like Rebirth hype.
It is. It's absolutely is. Because really all that this did was it just brought up all the old issues that people have, and so it's astonishing how much the criticisms have just been regurgitated, criticisms from before. A lot of it comes from the fact that there was just this dissonance that people were they were just unwilling to accept a particular character's survival. Like really, like it sounds nuts even after intergrade and intermission, but it is 100% centered around that, and I think this also threw it in their face that exists. You know.
Yeah.
See, I don't have that same. It's actually the exact opposite feeling that you're describing.
For me too.
I have the exact opposite feeling of
absolutely
not reigniting the old discussions. I actually feel like in a lot of ways, like, and it took me like a day or two to like figure out exactly like, and I still am trying to formulate like this feeling into words, but it feels almost like we're like Remake feels small, and like we're moving past it now into something so much bigger.
Yeah.
And
sure.
I think because the trailer sort of solidified, and I think that this was very deliberate, is that they wanted to show something that everybody was really excited about that was purely OG in terms of like dialogue and references and stuff like that, but like also collide that with the stuff that we know has been a discussion and things that people were really questioning and wanting to know more about. It's like we're just showing more and more of Zack, and the irony of it being is that it's like we're getting closer and closer to that moment where things are happening, the same way that Zack is getting like closer and closer to Midgar.
Sure.
Like in Remake, he was like on the mountain, and now he's walking in. And that's all we needed to see to sort of like have that result. It's like it feels very confident with the amount of so little shown.
I think what Clark, or how Clark explained it, you know, this opening of Old Winds kind of hits the nail on the head a little bit, because I think most people who played Remake have kind of made their peace.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not making their peace is maybe not the right way of phrasing it. They've kind of made a decision about how they feel about it. So we're not having this chat shortly after Remake was released. We're having this chat 2 years later, you know, where people have either said, okay, something's going on with Zack, he's still going to be here, he's going to be a big part of the story, I can accept that. Or people have said, I really don't like that, I don't like the direction they're headed in, I don't want this anymore. So what was being presented to us in the Rebirth trailer is not actually anything new, but it has kind of reignited everyone who'd made their peace with it is now really excited because they've got new content, and everyone that hated it is now feeling a bit antagonized, I guess, by it.
There's a little fire been lit.
Yeah, so I don't. There wasn't, or at least not that I saw. There weren't so many people in the denial camp anymore about the will they, won't they, and I think intermission did play a large part in that. You know, kind of reaffirming that Zack's actually in Midgard now. Like, there's something going on here. It's not, you know, it wasn't just that we're going to end Remake and then you won't see Zack again. It's, you know,
or the earliest like theories where it's like, oh no, we show Zack had won the battle. Cube part 2. The last 3 those troopers show out of nowhere, and
exactly. I think by this point the reaction that you've seen is either a lot of happiness or a lot of anger, but not confusion anymore, I guess. Is kind of what I'm getting at.
The mist has sort of cleared the space here a little bit. I think there's definitely a lot. Again, like the confidence going forward here, I think it's like this feels like the trilogy. It's not Remake. We've not seen any Final Fantasy VII so long. We've been like deprived, and then Remake comes out, and everyone is super stoked. And now that we've had time with Remake, we've had time with intermission, and just the other mobile games. It feels like now, rather than this sort of peak height of like the second coming of Final Fantasy VII has sort of arrived, it feels like this is riding on a very focused, very almost objective, like, this is what we're doing. We're not, it's exciting and everyone's super stoked, but I don't like all of those old things that got brought up with Remake feel so old, and it just feels like this is the game. We're like, I'm only focused on the game now. Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
the question is not whether or not it's changing. The question is, to what degree is it going to change? And
right, and I do want to break down the Rebirth trailer probably last, just because I think it's the thing that most people want to talk about. So to direct the conversation, let's just focus a little bit on Ever Crisis. Now, to just levy some confusion, even though there's a game called The First Soldier, when we are all talking about the First Soldier chapter of Ever Crisis, we don't actually know what it's called. We don't even know if canonically Sephiroth is the first soldier anymore. But you know that he certainly has been canonically the first soldier. But there's actually some really good articles that sort of put all that into question. It's a vague portion of the lore, but let's talk about Ever Crisis real quick. Some things about it that were kind of exposed for the first time is that we got to see some outfits. We got to see a samurai outfit of some form on Cloud, and then something that looks a sort of Renoa-esque on Tifa, and then like a princess type dress thing for Aerith. So I think what that illuminates immediately is, hey, let's not forget, this is a gacha game, right? So there's going to be that element, and that's sort of going to that's going to be the drive behind this game. But that being said, everything they showed off what felt like a mostly faithful recreation of source material. Crisis Core, we got that little bit. We got our first look at like HD Nibelheim through the Ever Crisis trailer, of all things. Or of that framing of Nibelheim. And so there's going to be these new environments, and we got to look at the library and how that looks, etc. We're going to get to see probably some stuff through Ever Crisis first in Ever Crisis before we see it in the other games, which is exciting for sure. I am really interested to see how they're going to somehow toe this line of giving people who really were hoping for something that really gave them the established canon, previous canon experience that they wanted, while still adding a new story about the origin of Sephiroth. Like there's this, it's going to be a real interesting balance to toe. And I am curious too if that even is a thing that's gonna happen. I mean, are they going to? Is Ever Crisis really the remake we all wanted, or is it something else that sort of collaborates the entire compilation in this sort of pocket form? And will Remake have a separate chapter than, say, Final Fantasy VII? So I'd like to get everybody's thoughts on them. Let's actually start with Kai Loomis.
Okay, so my opinion is to where it comes to how closely will Ever Crisis hew to the original games is I won't go so much to say as split the difference between Remake and the original game, but it's going to probably hew a lot closer to the original game. Entire lines of dialogue are lifted straight from the original and just been retranslated to match Remake's quality. Ask anybody from Shinra Archaeology, and the first thing they'll probably tell you is that, oh god, do not trust the original localization of 7 at all. It's
a trash fire.
Yes. However, given what the devs have said about certain choices when they were going about Remake, I suspect some changes that were made in Remake are going to probably stick to Ever Crisis when depicting certain scenes. For example, the first thing off the top of my mind is the collective God, oh God, why do we think this was a good idea? Honeybee Inn, where they mentioned when they were creating the Honeybee or Remake, they had one look at the material and decided, yeah, no, we need to update this for a modern audience because
Yeah.
I just need to allude to what the cut version of Honeybee Inn was. The live stream has a very good article about the cut version that you can find on the still incomplete,
Yeah.
and that the version that we see in the game still has references to what it was originally going to be. And I suspect changes like that will be backported into Ever Crisis because
Looks
you
like
know
we're
it
having
just
a little bit of
represents
a little bit of some lag problems. Sorry about that, guys. It's just
Uh.
the stream is just struggling. Just give it a minute. It's just a Twitch thing. Just happens. So
Yeah.
if we can do something about it, we will.
Yeah.
But just so everybody knows, it's probably just a hiccup on Twitch's end. Nothing to. I would recommend reloading the page.
Yeah.
Just everybody make sure to reload the page and you guys should be back online. It's quite simple. Sometimes it's just something that you guys can fix on your end. But thanks for letting us know. Anyway, sorry to cut you off, Kai. I just want to make sure that I handle
it's fine. It's fine. So I imagine changes like that are going to be the ones that stick. Maybe other other visual cues here and there. For example, when you saw Crisis Core's entry in Ever Crisis, especially with the first trailer, you see all the Shinra security officers wearing the remake style armor instead of their Crisis Core era armor. So visually,
We also
it's
have
going-
that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you go on now.
I was gonna say, like, even like just looking at like some of like the Sephiroth outfit being the same from like Remake, I was like, it's an interesting choice to keep that. I can understand why, like, just trying to unify like the style of it and everything like that seems like you'd want to reuse those assets. But for Remake, I do not want to see that. It's the fact that belt exists feels so like an end product Sephiroth outfit. It doesn't feel like he should just be wearing that outfit, you know, like in the calm flashback or in like kind of like the Sung ponytail. I think everybody here is familiar with that, but for anybody who doesn't know in the chat, is that Sung back in the day used to wear his hair up and just in a little bun or a little just a little ponytail, which is something that I was hoping would be in Remake when we see him in the flashback with Aerith, because he has it up like that then. And it's not in the final product, but I guess somewhere in the files for the game it is. So they were thinking that was like
young. There is a young Sung, but if you actually look at his concept art, he doesn't look like the Crisis Core version of young Sung.
Right. It's almost a little different.
It's the same length that it should be when he does wear the ponytail, suggesting that
he's the right age, but there's something more, some other aesthetic choice led to it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It does actually have the ponytail in Reunion, though. Did you see that?
What?
Yeah, he does.
Oh yeah. I was like, you mean in that one shot where he's literally being ignited into like,
right?
He's just being lit up by Genesis.
Yeah, it was basically watched Sung being burned about 15 times just to see what his hairstyle was.
So, so I mean, ultimately, do we think that what do you think, Mo? Do you think that what Ever Crisis is going to provide us is something that is meant to be the remake people wanted, or is it something more akin to just like a mobile diversion that a lot of people, who are currently playing the game will use as sort of like a, companion. Like, I think the best example I keep coming up with is, I'm not sure if you played 15 Pocket, but this feels very much like Final Fantasy 15 Pocket to me.
I think for me, my understanding of what Ever Crisis is going to be is that I think we can, most of us here, and so I guess most of us in chat, should really be of the opinion now that Remake and Rebirth are a sequel to the original compilation. And I think Ever Crisis is a unification of the original compilation that people can then play as a prequel to Remake.
Yes.
That's
literally it. That's my
You're gonna probably find Shinra Archaeology all agrees on that front.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think what they're doing is they're taking the same gameplay style, the same artistic style, and they're just putting it all in a neat little package that everyone can experience the original compilation in a way that most of us never could, specifically before Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back to the whole point about having Crisis Core Reunion, it doesn't make sense to me to have both stories exactly the same and release them simultaneously.
Sure.
So if Ever Crisis is being advertised as, well, I guess going back to it, I just get the feeling, or I interpret Ever Crisis to be a remaster to an extent of the original compilation, whereas Crisis Core Reunion is probably going to be post-Singularity Crisis Core.
I'm going to debate this just a tiny bit.
Okay.
What I think they're going to do with the remaster, because they're going to probably take advantage of that. You could see that the in-game engines are definitely using at least remake level modeling, even if it's being rigged off of Crisis Core's game engine. I believe the Final Fantasy Crisis Core Reunion is going to be a, for want of a better word, read adaptation. We're gonna hit all the same story beats, but if you ever when we translated
I do want to stick away from Crisis Core Reunion because we're gonna be very focused on that next. So just in terms of Ever Crisis, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just in terms of Ever Crisis.
Right.
Ever Crisis is going to give us a concise retelling of the original game.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I'll get to my thoughts on Reunion when we get
that'll be next. And I'm just gonna say this, and I think people are gonna be a little disappointed because I don't think that's what Ever Crisis will be. I don't think Ever Crisis is going to be faithful to the original quote unquote canon. I don't even think they're looking at things in that term. And the answer to why would this exist at the same time as Crisis Core, the same question could be asked of Final Fantasy 15 Pocket, which existed alongside Final Fantasy 15, told the same story, but it gave you the opportunity to dress up your characters and buy outfits and do DLC and do gacha stuff. It's just, and it's episodic too. We're not getting an indication that we're going to get all of Crisis Core in the first month of Ever Crisis. Yeah. We're getting little bits of each project, and so it's sort of the way that mobile games engage these days, particular gacha ones. I'm not going to be surprised if I see a Whisper show up in Ever Crisis, and I hope I'm wrong for that little segment of the population that really needs it to be something else. I hope I'm wrong. I just don't think so. I think that just in the same way there are like Whispers in the First Soldier and Genova costumes, like you can dress up as characters that aren't born yet in the First Soldier. I think we're going to see a lot of that sort of bending and breaking in Ever Crisis. I think very much you're going to be able to fight Minerva with a party of Kadaj, Elfie, and like Grimoire Valentine. Yeah,
Just for clarity, though, are
Yeah.
you talking specifically about the battles, or are you talking about the story as well?
I think
You're
the
talking about,
story.
like, Dissidia level of like interaction of characters.
I don't think it'll go that far. No, I think there'll still be
I see.
yeah.
I think that's a difference that I think I've made as well. Is that I think gameplay and the way that the story are going to be told are going to be completely separate. I don't think that even though you're fighting, Minerva with Gadaj or like Fajito or whatever, it's going to matter. It's like that's just what happens when you trigger like walking into like a battle scenario. Yeah,
All
you're
right.
just going to have this weird party, but
Okay, so let's talk about it then. Let's talk about it. Why is there an extra soldier in the Nibelheim flashback?
oh,
The only-
this is everyone's
the only-
quiet.
The only thing that I could ever come up with this one was that in the original story, there's Cloud or Zack, Cloud, Sephiroth in the back of the truck, and there's the driver,
Mm-hmm.
and then they arrive.
And then there's
They arrive
also
at-
the guy that falls down the bridge.
Exactly.
Oh,
So basically, yeah, like the guy that falls off the bridge, you're then just left with Cloud, Zack, and Sephiroth, but there's no kind of reference ever made to well, what else was going on. Was the truck just left on the outskirts of Midgar? All that sort of stuff. So I don't know. It's always been a question in my mind about why was there only two, and if there was only two. I mean, I guess the kind of talking about the truck's a bit of a weird way to go, but that was the kind of entrance that got me thinking
Mhm.
about it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
From a fan fiction point of view, of that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It-
So
Hmm.
to answer the question, I don't think there's anything in there sinister about it. I just think it makes more sense in a military point of
Right.
view, I guess.
To bring up a lore perspective on this, we know from both Before Crisis and Trace of Two Pasts that there was another Shinra team that arrived the day before to prep the area for the arrival of the soldier team. This being led by a Turk who would then go on to save Tifa, who was up on Mount Nibel.
Interesting.
Who was then recruited to become the tour guide the next day.
Interesting. So let me ask you this: Is
just
the-
in terms of
Okay, go ahead, Mo.
like in terms of lore, that I know obviously the Turk arrived, but
Mm-hmm.
is it confirmed that whoever was in the helicopter also attended? Because I don't, to the best of my knowledge, they don't specify that it's a different team.
The
I think-
I believe Trace of Two Paths implied that there were troops along with the Turk.
Okay.
It's
There's definitely a
I
Turk
glanced
there.
at it the
We
other
know
day.
that about that. Which, oh god, now you're getting me thinking about rebirth and what we're walking into. Maybe is a Shinra camp at the beginning. Oh god, I can't not talk about it. Yeah, but Ever Crisis totally is.
And so
It's
if
gonna
we're
be the
if we're
one
talking
for-
Traces of Two Paths, how does that belong in the continuity that we're talking about? Because remember, that is a remake book.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII Remake is on the title of
that's
Traces of Two Paths. So again, like
oh my god,
there's just
you
this.
just triggered me.
There's a lot of convolution regarding this. So
So I think we're maybe thinking about it more than the devs did.
that's what I
but
think
to-
too.
To go right back to what Kai was saying, there is the Turk in Before Crisis jumps out of a Shinra
Mhm.
helicopter at the start of the chapter, which means that there is at least a pilot, a Shinra pilot, that is in that vicinity at that time.
hmm
But
I guess what I'm trying to get at is I think maybe we ought to set our expectations for the seriousness by which they're delivering the Ever Crisis story a little lower than I think it is.
I'm curious because I don't necessarily think. I think the basic for me, a basic level of delivery for this is sort of what Mo and Kai are sort of talking about, is that at least this will be just a faithful retelling of the stuff that we already have seen, like Dirge of Cerberus,
Sure.
Before Crisis. I don't expect them to like do it like perfectly, but I feel like each beat will be it maintained, and that's something that they seem to have shown us a lot of. Is that a lot of these moments they're showing us a lot of moments that we already know about and how they're handled pretty much the same. So I'm not expecting drastic. I never expected Ever Crisis to be like this there's going to be twists and turns. Like from what I understand, like this First Soldier story and the Sephiroth thing could have already happened within that continuity. That's sort of how I see it. Is that like this Sephiroth story is just a view of Sephiroth that we just have never seen before, and it almost is not. It's not going to radically change our perspective on like what Remake is going to be, or what like this changes everything about Dirge of Cerberus. It's not going to have that level of impact, but it's going to be a really interesting insight into that that character.
Exactly,
and that's neat. But I don't think there's any like as far as like how the whatever DMW thing system or whatever, like where you get to like choose characters from a different time and all this stuff. Like that's not. I'm like, as much as I'm the one to like DMW has a little bit more character relevance. But as far as like being able to like put whoever in your party, that's just gonna be for the fun of it, and I'm not gonna look too deeply into that myself. I think as far as like the other bits of compilation, like you're talking about, like Traces of Two Paths, I think that they also have a similar place in the story of as far as like here is information about these moments that are just expanding upon what we already know. It's kind of like, not to, and I don't take this literally, by the way, but like it's a good sort of analogy that like Aerith uses, is that the past is the past. And that's what that is. And it's not like something drastic is happening there. We should just be focusing on the future. You know what I mean?
I think we're all agreeing that this isn't going to be a big deal. Like you're not going to need Ever Crisis to understand the game. That the extra benefits of Ever Crisis are going to be, it's going to expand parts of the lore that we would in no other way look at. You know, like the Sephiroth chapter is a really good example. Like, is there stuff that we want to know about Sephiroth's childhood? This is the place to look at it. It doesn't have to have any kind of impact on the overall continuity of either. I just really, really think that maybe let's all keep our expectations low, that this is the remake that people quote unquote wanted. I got the remake I wanted, but I know that a lot of people didn't.
Right.
So
I don't think that at this point anybody should be looking to the mobile game to do anything more than what a mobile game. This is
right. I've only seen 4 or 5 people in chat say that that's what they're hoping for. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
So to all of them, Sleepezi doesn't like you.
That's right.
I'm just kidding.
I have disdain and anger in my heart for all. I'm just saying is that it's a mobile game, and that it's okay that like this is just a mobile game, and if you wanted that, and this is sort of the way that Mo already phrased it is that some of these titles have just never been able to be played even. So it's like, that's the win. The rub here is Before Crisis.
It really is. 100%.
DOC and Crisis Core with less shitty gameplay. Maybe it's replaced with bad gameplay, period, but it's not going to be DOC bad gameplay or Crisis Core bad gameplay. We're going to get something else unified, and a way that everybody... This is what Reunion did. And I'm not going to go into Reunion. I'm just going to say this, is that the one thing about that whole situation was that if they're going to remake it, then why are we getting Ever Crisis covering Crisis Core? It makes very little sense to me why they would do that, unless what that is trying to do is just be faithful to what people should have experienced, or that they want to have people experience from the older compilation.
It's a non-console game that prints money. That's why they're always going to do it. Like Again,
Yeah.
when people keep people bringing up, well, it can't be redundant. Like, they would never do that. They do that because it prints money.
Well,
They
you would
did
think
it
that it's
with
redundant.
they did it with Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 again came out with Final Fantasy 15 Pocket, which was a gacha mobile version of Final Fantasy 15. Went through the same story, printed money.
So
That's why.
in that instance, maybe, right?
Who'd we
In
lose?
that instance, maybe. What? We lost somebody?
Oh yeah.
Hello. What?
Oh, you're here. You're here.
Well,
Mo's gone.
Mo
This
dropped
happens.
out, and so everybody's face got. We'll fix
we're not gonna
this in
jump into-
post. We'll fix this in post,
something.
guys.
We'll put a lovely photo of Mo here, which will be Zirconiad, to highlight all of the contributions that MJ has made outside of his
He's
Norse
back.
mythology references.
He's back.
Sorry, guys. Sorry about that.
No, it's all fine. I was gonna say, as maybe a segue for you, Clark, and the rest of us to get maybe in the reunion is that in the sake of Final Fantasy 15,
Mhm.
that might be the case, but we do have a new title.
Okay,
in
you're right.
The form of Crisis Core Reunion that has a different connotation, just even in the title and some of the other things that we've seen.
All right,
hosted
that's
recently
fair.
by the
Okay,
staff.
I will introduce this new concept. So, for the maybe big surprise of the 25th anniversary showing was Crisis Core Reunion. So it's the English press sites call it a remaster, and if you look at them side by side, it looks like a pretty faithful one-for-one, complete from the ground up rebuild. So it looks to be using Unreal Engine. We still don't actually know who localized this or who developed it. There's rumors that it was actually Bandai Namco, but we don't know yet for sure who actually made this game. But it appears to be using Unreal Engine. Graphically, it is like night and day. It's a completely different game. It is in English, completely redubbed, and the press sites are saying that it is completely voiced. And anybody that is familiar with the original Crisis Core knows that that was not completely voiced.
Yep.
So that's a difference right there. It's called Reunion, and even though the North American press sites refer to it as a HD remaster, the Japanese about sections refer to it as much more than a simple remaster. So these are all things to consider. Another thing to consider is that the title, Reunion, refers to an event and a concept that do not occur within the game Crisis Core. Reunion is specifically a post Sephiroth hitting the live stream thing, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. So Mo, what are your thoughts about Crisis Core Reunion?
Well, going back to, do you mean my thoughts on whether or not it is a remaster or a remake kind of idea, or do you think, or just in general, is that?
Sure. Well, okay. Tell us. Do you think it's going to deviate? Do you think? Are you excited about it? What's happening?
To be honest, I think we're probably going to see. I do genuinely believe that there's going to be a difference in it, and I think that the difference is maybe going to be on the same level, possibly less, with Remake. And the reason I think this is I'm of the opinion that there are going to be some changes that exist within Rebirth that cannot be explained wholly through Crisis Core as it currently exists. I think they will have to change certain elements of Crisis Core to flow into Rebirth. So I think the reason that they're doing more than a remaster of Crisis Core is that they can make a few tweaks to the story, which makes Rebirth even better. A couple of examples. Well, obviously we already know about the Zack surviving one, but another example would quite simply be what happens to Genesis after the battle at Benora. Because what we know is that, you know, from the Crisis Core Ultimania is that he's picked up by Vice and Nero, he's taken to Deep Ground, he is asked to participate in their revolt against the Restrictors. He rejects it and then he seals himself in a watery tomb, only to be reawoken after Dirge of Cerberus. But what happens if that changes? What happens if everything up to Genesis going to Deep Ground is the same, but something in that period of time changes? Which means that whatever happens in Rebirth ties in with Genesis being present in Midgar.
Thank you for hitting the quota of talking about Genesis during the stream.
So I think I you know, from the trailer alone, it looks very much like, for the most part, you know, it's just a really, really, really upgraded version of Crisis Core, because side by side you can see that, you know, the base design is there. I think that there's a couple of I don't remember the way that they've edited the trailer. I don't know whether or not that's actually the same edit that they used in the original Crisis Core trailer. It seemed very familiar, but I could be way off on that. I don't think having Zack the puppy in there is a coincidence either. Because to the best of my knowledge, Zack the puppy wasn't something that was mentioned in the original Crisis Core trailers.
It's not mentioned in the trailers, but it is in the dialogue.
Oh no, I know what. Sorry,
Okay.
I mean specifically in the trailers.
Okay.
Because I don't recall seeing Zack the puppy as a concept until playing Crisis Core for the first time. And I'm happy to admit that I'm wrong on that. So it seems weird that Zack the puppy as a concept would then be focused on in the reunion trailer. But that's kind of head spinning off in terms of the Zack the stamp connotations there. There's obviously a lot of the trailer looks as if they're using a lot of remakes assets, like Ifrit and Bahamut is one of the ones that made me laugh is that the Buster Sword asset is the same from Remake.
Even in the CG. They even redid the CG trailers, which is interesting.
Yeah, but I don't mean the Buster Sword hilt. I actually mean the Buster Sword, the scratches on it. So if you look at the scene where Angeal's delivering the, you know, wear, tear and rust line, go back and look at the trailer because there's a huge amount of scratches on it. The same way that there is in remakes. So it's just ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, and also
this is what we all talked about across the board before we knew about the Crisis Core reunion thing. One of the things that Ever Crisis was very clearly doing was like reusing a lot of assets that we had already knew prior, and Crisis Core reunion is doing the same thing. But one of the things that we were talking about mostly was like how much money they're going to save making these assets so that if they do show up in Remake, they can just throw them into the mobile games. And that one in particular, I think is hilarious. That is so funny.
They still messed that one up though. Like the CG trailer or the CG elements that were remastered, the coloring's different, doesn't have scratches. There's an element of the gold underneath, like the
highlight of gold underneath.
It's really easy to get hung up on these. You
gotta just use your imagination.
Yeah, I mean, like in all realistically, between now and winter, there's a good chance they'll fix that. So I agree. To get something out.
Yeah.
One of the things actually, well, there's two things about
reunion
that, or two more things that kind of jumped out at me. The first one is that obviously the DMW is still there.
Uh-huh.
combat seems to have been tweaked to an extent. The DMW is still there, so I'm interested to know, first of all, if DMW is going to play the same role in combat as it already did. Second of all, the point of the DMW from a narrative perspective at the end of the game really comes into focus, and it totally delivers the whole thing about Zack losing his memories
Right.
as he begins to die, right? But if this is going to feed into Remake and he doesn't die, then how is the DMW
Coming to
impact?
Rebirth?
Well,
Don't say that.
No,
Don't you dare.
Where
I
was going with that,
agree
baby
with
seal?
you.
Only your brain, baby seal would stop. Hold on, wait a second. Let's just pause for a second.
Oh,
Pause the stream.
Salinil, thank you so
Salinil,
much.
what on earth are you
what
up
are you
to, my
doing?
friend? That's a lot of sauce to be dumping in. So you like the DMW? Is that why you dropped that? As Baby Seal was saying that DMW and Rebirth. We'll talk to Nomura. We'll do whatever you want us to do. Frankly, super thanks.
We'll get it.
for
Okay,
that. Holy-
my bad. I love the DMW. Thank you, DMW-san, for your love.
It was
can't believe it.
DMW San's idea.
Yeah,
Hey.
we were talking about that in Baby Seal.
Whoever
the
said that,
DMW as
I
a
agree
threat.
with you. I love the DMW too.
Thank you.
Oh my god, no.
Yes. Yes.
No, it's
Embrace it.
Okay.
Don't deny it.
It's
Embrace
awful.
it.
No, it's awful. It's so cool I was gonna bring this up as a concept. DMW is fantastic.
All right. Sure. As a concept, it's great. You had another point, Mo, and I'm sorry that we cut you off.
Yeah,
I'm sorry that Sleepezi cut you off.
You really, really will be.
Oh God.
So, basically where I was going with that is that from a narrative perspective, the DMW functions and really delivers at the end when Zack dies. But from Remake, if he doesn't die, then the impact is not there anymore. So is it worth keeping the DMW for that? Or are they quite simply just as a remaster and that's just how the game functions? They can't amend that. We'll see. But the other point, and this is not something that I've actually seen anyone else talking about in context of how Reunion and Rebirth might be connected. So the obvious one there is that everyone's talking about Angel and Genesis and how they might come into play in Rebirth because of who Genesis is and because of the white feather and all this stuff. Okay, but nobody's actually talking about, well, Crisis Core introduces a lot more detail about Wutai and how Wutai works than any other compilation title.
Oh yeah.
Which means that
There's
if you're
some
going
before
to
Crisis, but you're right.
there's very, very, very little in Before Crisis.
Yeah.
There's obviously
No, I agree.
chapter 14 takes place in Wutai, but it doesn't talk about Wutai as a nation or Wutai as a military organization.
Right.
Whereas Crisis Core does. You know, we've got the whole side missions about the Crescent units, the whole resistance after the war, we've got the whole Fort Tamblin thing. So there's a lot of stuff there that could then feed into what we expect to be a much bigger Wutai Avalanche Shinra mishmash relationship going on. Which is why, just another reason I think that there's probably going to be extended scenes or changes that are made to Reunion that will feed into Rebirth.
You're talking a lot of really good stuff. I'm gonna go and just step like knee deep into some like crazy Sleepezi idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I just had this while we were kind of talking about it.
Right.
And you mentioned the DMW scene. I think that's what we all know. And I'll just really quickly refresh chat's sort of memory of this is that the DMW is essentially based around the concept of Zack's death scene. Like that works so well because that was like the pinnacle of what they wanted to implement gameplay wise with the story. And that is, and it shows, like, even for somebody who doesn't like the DMW as much, like that scene hits exactly the way that it should. But when we're talking about using that for story purposes and taking the idea of reunion as a sort of cue that things might change, wouldn't it be really cool that they use the DMW to signify the connection between reunion and rebirth to a certain degree? Sort of like in the way that they use it for Zack's death. What if they actually use it again as a story tool? Because and this is mainly going off of me being out of my mind and writing a lot about how like memories and the live stream are very like interconnected, and the DMW is part of that in that sort of way. I wonder how they could make that work, if
You
at
mean just
all.
like having the enigmatic spectre as one of the faces in the DMW reel, or
just some sort of like that would be exactly the reaction that we had. I think there might be just some moment of like that phasing in, because we also know that we see like flashes of memories of things that are like, what if we start seeing things that maybe Zack has never seen before or something like that? These are like very small levels of me, like, I'm sure that there's a better idea for this, but I feel like if you're going to really get people sold on and have these two things connected right at that moment, because here's the thing, and this is what I've been saying, is that moment works so well for Crisis Core. That moment is the moment in Crisis Core, is that scene of Zack's death.
Yeah,
you would need to
absolutely.
equally replace that with something as impactful.
Okay, all right, or not replace it, but what you could do is create an alternative ending, final mix it, where you 100% the game or something and get that, or a post-credit.
Yeah, we talked about Shinra Mythology, where we could have it where the game could set it up as Crisis Core Reunion goes through the story beats more or less the same, maybe adding scenes that were cut out from the game. Because if you go through the Ultimania, we were supposed to get more story. Avalanche was supposed to have a role in Crisis Core. We were supposed to see more of the escape from Nibelheim with Zack and Cloud. More Zareth goodness for all of you who partake in that. So, you beat the game properly the first time. Credits roll. You get to the ending, which is showing the beginning of Final Fantasy VII, or it could even be the remake version of the opening.
Mm-hmm.
We get to the point where Cloud says, "I'm Cloud, soldier, first class." You could have it then be set up where, imagine, you know how when memories start going all funky in Final Fantasy VII, you get that CRT snow effect?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the static.
The static shows up, memory pauses. You get a rewind effect going all the way back to the last stand. And if you 100% complete it, get to see how it connects to Remake.
That would be kind of neat.
Change
I'd be kind of down for that.
And
I'd be a little down for that.
So
I might really be interested in that.
Kay, go on. Why don't you tell us more about your thoughts of the whole reunion thing? I mean, like, one of the things that I think I've found most fascinating about some of you guys' research is the tremendous amount of cut content in Crisis Core. I'm going to be honest, the finished product of Crisis Core has not aged well to me. I enjoyed it when it came out because it was like, this blew my brain apart for a PSP game. Like, this was, it was a AAA PSP game. It was the only good PSP game at the time. And so I was like, this is really cool, blah, blah, blah. But as I've thought about it, it just felt like a lot of the story beats were really abbreviated. Genesis ruined the Nibelheim incident, blah, blah, blah. Zack fell through the church again, and it just felt like the worst parts of George Lucas's writing, all that sort of stuff. But like, looking at some of the cut content that you've found that I think really like fleshed this out in a more interesting way, I do really feel like we were robbed, based on some of the technical limitations of the UMD format. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Okay, so going through the interviews of the creators for Crisis Core, be it the battle developers, be it the cutscene developers, be it the story writers, everybody except for Ishimoto, who composed the music, had one shared agreement. Screw the UMD.
Mm-hmm.
They all complained that the UMD's limited space prevented them from basically telling the story they wanted to tell. It got to the point that Tabata went to Square Enix to ask, hey, can you let us have a second disc for Crisis Core so that we can actually tell the full story? And they basically said no. For example, the investigation into Benora, where Genesis massacred the town, was supposed to be far more extended. We were supposed to investigate more of the buildings, find Genesis copies lurking around. You even can find a concept art of this. And we don't know too much about what was going to be contained in those story beats, just general descriptions of what was cut. So we can only speculate on how that was originally supposed to go. The only thing that Nojima said was intended only partly because of the UMD space. This was his solution to getting around it, was all the parallels between Zack and Aerith and how they met and interacted with one another. Because of the space, they needed to create a quick way to establish how much they relate to one another and connect. And that's why they decided to echo the original game. And they partially also did this for the same idea that Cloud's memories are echoing Zack's. So it's playing into that irony that that Cloud in the original game is literally echoing the things that Zack did. And Remake even plays into this. The famous scene on the playground where Aerith notices Cloud's eyes. That is word for word, especially in the Japanese version, the same dialogue between Zack and Cloud. Zack and Aerith. Sorry, I'm speaking fast.
It's okay.
So that was done partially intentionally, partially as a way to get around the UMD. So if they had all the space they wanted, they probably would have still played into that parallel, but we would have seen more context for why they did it.
Right.
We would have gotten more
feel
time
like
with
that
Aerith.
way a lot.
Yeah.
I feel that way a lot about Crisis Core because coming from somebody who isn't necessarily, I really, obviously, and I think everybody knows this, like I'm a huge fan of like some of the lore and elements of Crisis Core, and there's something that I've been like super fixated on, like even like especially when I first started, because it just seemed like a lot of those sort of that's what Crisis Core feels like to me, is that it was supposed to sort of be the collection of like this is the final part that we're going to release for the compilation. It has to tie everything together, right? And the unfortunate truth of the compilation has always been that different directors, lack of time, different reasons for making the games entirely, like just in terms of like what they wanted to use for marketing purposes, what they like with like Dirge of Cerberus, and then a PSP game for like Crisis Core. It's like there's a lot of like hands in this thing, and then trying to force it into this sort of cohesive story that fits well and is told well, and that's just not what happened at all, in my opinion. I think that Crisis Core, though it's supposed to sort of be that final like stamp on this like sort of story, it feels like there's so much, and this is why Remake feel like was such like I started getting so into Remake in terms of looking at it through the compilation, is that there's just so much of Crisis Core that just feels undone. They answer some things, but most of those answers lead to a lot more questions, like the Vice and Nero ending, and like that just leads into literally an unexplained like him coming back in DOC. So it's like there's no, and Minerva, like who the fuck is that? Like we've never seen this
the
bitch,
Crisis Core keywords. They explain this.
They do. But I'm saying is that from a narrative perspective, from a cohesive narrative of like the story, for me, it feels so incomplete. And I think this is what you're talking about from like this sort of narrative of like, it comes through so clearly is that the thing that's tying this game together in terms of like sort of the lead through, you can talk about Agile and Genesis and all that, is the Aerith and Zack sort of through line of the story. It really kind of gets that beginning and middle and end very clearly across as sort of the base of the narrative. But it's so clear too that they're trying to do so much other stuff that just doesn't feel the same as like some of those other moments. Like I think we can all agree that there are actually some pretty interesting character interactions with like these people, the characters that we know, maybe not the ones that are introduced, but like Zack and Aerith, like, and just Zack in general, the way that he's portrayed in it is very like awesome. I think it's perfect. It's like exactly how I kind of envisioned that character to be before I played the game, and it's just like that's great. But it's just so interesting to me because like that's what Reunion, I really, and this is why I said Final Mix, is that I really want this to feel like the game that they wanted to make. And I think while the marketing of this being like HD and like an HD remaster or something more than that, it's like I understand that if that's what all they could do, if that's all that they could do, like I get it, because that's a lot of extra work, time, and like you guys are following things so to a T that I can understand it not being that thing, and so I don't want to get my hopes up too much.
Sure.
But if you really want to like end the like people, you cannot. In my mind, I don't think that the DMW currently as it is will resonate with a modern audience perspective on gameplay, which we've already seen. There's obviously some changes being made with that to a degree to probably make it more modern, but it's like you really got to solidify with your audience, especially your remake audience who hasn't played these games, that there's something worth coming back here for other than just the story and like, or parts of the story, like Zack the puppy line, that's great, but like give us something more substantial than the base of Crisis Core, because to me it just feels
I think you've already answered that particular question of something that hadn't dawned on me about the obviously looking at DMW as a narrative and getting to the end of the game, but you know there are times within the battles where a specific flashback will trigger that you wouldn't see anywhere else in the game, and some of them are not referenced anywhere else in the compilation. Yeah. But if you start introducing the same thing here, where it's a flash forward, the same way that the party sees in the Singularity, that they actually see events in the future, if you start introducing that via the DMW and confusing Zack, it then creates this scenario where you've actually changed the story, you've given the DMW a new function, you can add lore and add intrigue as to Zack being confused about what's going on here.
Oh, absolutely. Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's, and I think
that literally got me more excited than the game itself, is just the concept of like seeing maybe scenes. That's where your secret ending can come in, by the way, is have like a list of like viewable DMW sequences, right?
Sure.
That we all want to see. And then maybe after you beat, like, this is me being crackpot again, but like beat Minerva, and then you get a new DMW sequence added into the list, and it's got like question marks, and then you see like Genesis showing up. You see how that whole thing plays out, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Like, we've never gotten to see this before. Even if it's something like that, but in the way that you described it, literally that would be the perfect way to add to the game without interfering. So
right. And so, you know, the concept of DMW is really tied into with the tessellations and you know, when we talk about memory. And so when I'm complaining about the DMW, by the way, I'm complaining about its role in combat. And the reason I think it's terrible in combat is the pachinko element. And I think that almost works counter to like its story function. It's supposed to be this thing that actually represents agency. It represents memory, and sure, there's an element of randomness when we're remembering things that you can tie to the pachinko element. When you're just sitting around cogitating, random memories pop up. But, like having the forced DMW stuff was a really effective way of connecting us emotionally. It was an effective way of connecting to the greater lore. And then it ended up being sort of this really heavy subtext of everything involving the whispers, involving the singularity, etc. So do I think that those things can tie in? Absolutely. I think they'd be silly not to do that. I also do want to kind of temper some expectations here. It is very unlikely that this game was made in-house. And so when you have a game that's not made in-house, it's a remaster done by a third-party company, you'll generally see less, story changes or big new sweeping changes. I think it's going to be really, there's going to be like we talked about this final mix concept. There might be one or two extra things that are added, outside, like a secret boss, that sort of stuff. Definitely secret ending. But overall, I would say it's pretty unlikely that we're going to get full restructuring. In terms of combat, people have talked about the combat. I've looked really closely at the differences in combat and even been playing Crisis Core. What I can tell you is that the combo system is more sophisticated. The lock-on system is it's much more smooth. It's spatially different. Things like dodging have a different timing window. There's different iframes. So I think the best comparison that I can come up with for this style of remaster is Nier Replicant 1.22. This seems to be very akin to the level of remaster that was, where there are some extra story chapters and stuff like that. There's an extra ending, but they've worked out spacing and spatializing combat to make it better. But absolutely, DMW is still there. DMW is still there, and they've reused some of the assets for monsters and stuff like that. I'm really excited for Reunion, even though I think that we're probably only going to see one or two new things, simply because we're going to get this huge graphical update to a bunch of favorite locations. Benora, we're going to see HD Benora. We're going to see Nibelheim in its full glory for the first time in Reunion. We're going to see Loveless. And my big thing is, I bet you Loveless is not going to be quite the same. I bet you Loveless is just going to be a little different, and it's going to be different in a way that really helps us understand things.
Hope so.
So
I really do.
Question on that is that, do you think that the changes to Loveless will be more akin to maybe a Japanese 1-for-1 rather than maybe some of the other translations of it from the original game? Or do you think that there's literally going to be oh god,
I think it's going to be different.
Oh god, my brain.
I think it's going to be the same, but we're going to see how it connects.
I'm also leaning towards that too, Kai, a little bit more than
I actually did a partial retranslation of at least the first bit of Loveless.
Yeah. I remember looking at that, and I was like, there's a lot of insight from the Japanese version of it. So
would anybody like to actually hear it? Because I know Sleepezi has heard it, but
actually, if you know what, do you have a document or because I want to look at it.
I can post it in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's post it in
and
the
can
chat,
you also post it in the our chat as well?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna do.
Oh, that's the one you're talking about.
Do you think then Act 5 is going to just be, because of the whole story about the remake project being the 5th part of the compilation, which goes back, the Act 5 will change?
I think Act 5 will change. I think that's
what I was
exactly what
Act
I'm
5 will be expanded on.
That's
that would
different.
be really
So that's technically a change. So we all agree with my idea. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
No. When you say Loveless is gonna be different, the way that you said that, it sounded like they're gonna like change. They're gonna change like the words.
They're not going to take away the poetic genius. You're not going to lose the experience. I'm not trying to hurt you.
Okay. All right. I feel safe now.
What?
Don't change my Loveless.
I can't wait to see the Loveless poster in Sector 8.
Come on. Where is it?
I was gonna say that what if you can find this is where my brain goes, and it's like, God, I just wish that they had called it something akin to it, like somebody in the future. I really hope that they do say this at some point before Reunion comes out. I want them to say this is sort of like a final mix of. They need to say that because that's the only thing that's going to convince me that there's going to be any changes to this. But I want somebody to find that last page of Loveless. That's what I want. I want that to be like an end game secret item that you can get. That's what I want. I want these things, Square. I want Crisis Core Reunion to be more than just a remaster. I want Minerva looking fine as hell. I want the idea of DMWs in it.
You know, I really want as well. I want that in the Benora Underground. They've actually got the 3 tablets for Acts 1, 2, and 3 of Loveless. I want Acts 4 and 5 tablets to be in the Grimoire Valentine's Cave.
Right.
Grimoire Valentine's Cave. And what are they going to do about the reused weapon assets in the Benora Cave? For the unnamed weapon that isn't technically the diamond weapon.
Now, I only sorry.
And it's the emerald weapon that's in Benora Cave. It's not.
No, it's not. We figured that it's some other unnamed.
This is a Shinra Archaeology Department thing.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that, Kai, or the weapon is not necessarily the emerald weapon?
Yeah, it's in the developer notes for I believe this is in the Crisis Core Ultimania. I'll have to double check to be 100% on that. The developer said that it's supposed to be a brand new weapon we have never seen before. When Benora was being investigated as a location for mining Mako, they dug too deep, found the cave, and found the weapon down there, and went, nope, we may be greedy, but we're not stupid.
Right.
Wow. Christ.
Isn't that kind of neat, though?
I know.
That's really awesome.
I was also like, but it looks like it. But then at the same time, it's like, am I going to argue with the text? And also, that's that whole story about digging too deep. Is that what is the end of the road for all 4 of us? Is that digging too deep into Final Fantasy VII? You're going to meet a giant weapon that has never been discovered? Is that where we end up?
Where all of you
At the
probably
bottom
will
of
end
the
up.
menu. Yeah,
Shinra Archaeology
exactly.
will probably end up pissing off the Whispers.
That's right. I actually do really quickly I did want to ask this before we get off of Reunion. Is there something it doesn't matter what it is, what do you want from Reunion that isn't in the original game, or just anything that you want, really? What are we excited for? It doesn't have to be reasonable.
I want a conclusion to Genesis. What happens after it gets taken away from Benora. I have to know. The Genesis lack of conclusion has driven me crazy for years. I have to know what happens.
Yeah, you and me, I think, are in the same boat on this one. What about you, Baby Seal?
I could do. I don't need to know much about Genesis and Reunion since he'll be in Rebirth, but I would say
that's
that
probably the answer. But
I would say that I do hope that there's a couple things that happen in Crisis Core that I'm not ultra fond of. That they kind of work out or make add a little bit of, I don't know, just perspective to. I would really like to see the Nibelheim incident in full HD, and I'm really curious how they're going to handle that in Reunion, because we're going to get, this full HD retelling of the Nibelheim incident, and then, in Rebirth, we're going to get a different version of that. And I think that in Reunion, we're going to see little elements, little clues. But most of all, what I really want to see in Reunion is Stamp. I want them to make sure that Stamp is a concept in Reunion.
Yeah.
I cannot believe I did not see that coming.
Zach,
I was like
Zach,
shocked.
go buy
Yeah.
Aertha Stamp plushie. It is your
Yeah,
destiny.
exactly. That's what is gonna happen. We're gonna get Stamp plushies. They're gonna be everywhere. It's
And
gonna
then
be on the
Square Enix
cart.
will put it on the store, and it'll be like
so-
$45.
Baby Seal, gun to your head.
Mhm.
Which stamp would it be?
It
Oh,
will
God.
be.
Gun to your head. Yeah. What is? Tell us what dog? What dog is it?
I
What
think.
dog is it?
I think it'll be a beagle, and it will change to a terrier
In the next save file.
in Crisis
the
Core.
DMW.
In Crisis Core,
Oh my
it'll
God.
change, and it'll still not be explained. I do not think we will get a solution to the Stamp mystery until the third part.
What?
I really don't.
What?
Well, because I cannot
no.
wait to tell you why I've titled Remake as I have, is a Nomura statement regarding the third title, not the first title. He is excited for us to know why he called it Remake. So there you go.
Yeah, but you don't think we're gonna see a single Stamp
Oh, I will.
in the next game?
We'll see
Okay,
so
well,
much
then-
Stamp. We're not going to get an answer to the mystery.
No, we'll figure that out as soon as we know what Stamp is there. We're
As
gonna
soon
be
as
like,
we
all
okay,
right.
so all right, so let's break that down. We see Stamp the puppy in Crisis Core. I'm talking about Reunion. Let's
Okay.
say it's a beagle.
All right, yeah, we see the beagle.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It is pre-rewrite.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say we see a terrier. What does that mean?
Rewrite.
Yeah.
Okay.
That-
When is the
my
rewrite?
consensus is the
What
same.
rewrites it?
The
Well,
singularity.
moment.
that's
Loud
kind
in
of
the
the point
party.
that the singularity is beyond time, therefore
Right.
it has to be the whole
Right.
A
whole game
ripple
has
effect.
to be terror.
Yes.
Right. So what is the singularity? Who causes it and why?
Sephiroth causes a singularity in time because of events, presumably somewhere after Dirge of Cerberus, most likely,
Uh-huh.
where something has happened. Sephiroth has made good on his plan, but events go sideways, or his plan from the very beginning involves going Terminator back into the past so that he can rewrite his destiny to fail by
Something's
unmooring it.
happening.
Right. So we
Right,
don't
yeah.
so
Or
so
any faction of that.
so in other words, we don't know.
No.
Neither
No.
give us a clear answer.
But you
Now-
don't think that there will be enough information to draw so you're just saying until Nomura says it, there won't be an answer is what your perspective of it is. I think that there will be enough narrative in the second one to create a 99%.
Oh yeah, no,
That's
because yeah, that's what sells is certainty.
Now-
is solved
No, you know,
puzzles.
Yeah. But I
This is
I,
what we
I disagree.
do.
I think the whole
I dis-
situation is that anything that gets created from here on out
Uh-huh.
either falls into the category of it's a prequel to Remake or it's a sequel to Remake, because the singularity affects all points in time,
Yeah.
Sure.
right? So by definition, even if you are talking about like something that happened before the continuity, when Cloud and the party step out of the singularity,
Sure.
everything that existed or everything that is the history of that timeline must be Terrier Stamp, because that's the difference. Therefore, Crisis Core Reunion to exist after Remake must be Terrier Stamp, because even though it is back in time, it's still post Singularity.
That would be interesting. Be interesting actually if they do both. Like at first, like halfway through the game, it's Beagle Stamp,
Right.
and then when Zack starts maybe seeing flashes of the future and things are going funky, we see an
Things
image
start
of
changing.
Stamp, and midway through the game, Stamp is suddenly a terrier.
Right,
But
because
that's-
Zack
look,
doesn't comment on it.
because
but
look, we
Zack was never in the Singularity though. Like his entire timeline, unless you change the timeline within the game, is that the point of the party being different is they step out into the Singularity, which is outside the
So
point
then
of time.
again,
well, then how
blame-
is Zach
I
even?
blame-
How is Zach
I
even
blame
seeing
all of this
things?
on Schrodinger's baby seal.
How is that? Well, no. This is. I know this is the main thing people want to talk about, really, and I know it's the thing that you talk least about, but like, really. So
I'm
we're
mostly
talking
joking.
we're
We
talking
should be
about it
talking about
cohesively. Like, how does the singularity affect the past? Right? So we're talking about the events of Crisis Core as if they're post singularity because the bag is a terrier. But we see things that are happening as a result of things in the singularity at the end of Remake, presumably 3 months before the events of Remake. So I don't think that the way we're conceptualizing the singularity as like, you know, this linear divot in the middle of an event, I think it has more of a ripple effect. That's why I always make a joke about time being a flat circle. And it's also why I always bring back, I mean, if we're going to talk about time travel and we're going to talk about active development of Remake, let's not forget that the people behind 13.2 are heavily involved in this game. So as much as I want this to be this incredibly cohesive, you know, this happened and then it, you know, and then now we're in the future, but we're in a changed future. I think that what we looked at with the destruction of the singularity is probably better conceptualized as a ripple effect. So I would not be surprised if, like Kay just said, we see things begin to change as sort of retroactively the effects of the singularity being destroyed, you know, make this this impact. I think that'd be the most effective way to change the story. And does it make any sense? No, but time travel doesn't make sense. So you know,
fair enough.
yeah.
Actually,
My opinion is that either it all changes or none of it changes, and that's the point of the singularity.
Okay, I hear you.
But okay, sorry, Kay. What were we going to say?
I was gonna say counterman. Actually, retract something I said earlier about like don't have Zach comment on it at all. It would actually be more interesting and foreshadowing his role in Rebirth by having him notice it, but not like in a what the hell kind of way. Stare at it and go, funny. It looks different. And like kind of scratching his head at it.
He'll just be like, I wonder
Like
if
a
this
kind
is
of
a dog
deja vu kind of feel.
Yeah. If first he has to comment on it being like, oh, so this is why Angeal like calls me a puppy. Like I get it. Like, haha, Angeal, like this is why you wrote in the letter that. And then that's when you set up both the twist of the change and then him being like, huh, like I've never seen this before. And maybe different chip brand. And then he just leaves. Gamora
Grip, thank you so much for the gift subs. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. I find all of this deeply fascinating. I do think that they're having it change. I was talking about this with some rebirth stuff with Clark a little bit, but I really do think that it's an interesting concept to mid game do some changes. I really do like that, because it kind of like it would unsettle me deeply to do that. Like I'd be like, oh my god, this is where we're about to like pop off the rails and things are gonna start going south. Like in any way, like whatever's happening like during the setup of like an event that we've already been familiar with, if things just start tweaking slightly, I think this is why we're all on guard also about like the 3 soldiers, rather than it just being the 2. I think that's why something like that is so deeply unsettling, is because like any change to something that seems to be somewhat representing anything familiar being tweaked is like, and actually, ironically, this is what everyone was saying about the Buster Sword, right? Is that like we all saw the Buster Sword in Advent Children scene in Remake, and then now they just said, oh my god, people noticed like this small detail. That's what it feels like to me, at least. People notice this detail, and we cannot lead them on to think that this is actually happening, so we're gonna just change it, or it's just gonna be some sort of cue into something else. But I feel like I doubt that. I feel like they just want to literally erase that from ever being a thing, because it's like, it's not as iconic.
I want to clarify that it would be, personally, I would really like just a full-blown explanation for the Whispers, what they are, why they appeared, what the mechanic behind it is in Crisis Core Reunion. I think getting that out of the way would be really comforting to me as a person in the lore, just so we can move forward and just we're good.
So satisfying too.
It would be
worth
great
playing the game just for that answer.
It would be.
I have an idea for how they could even do this kind of mechanic. We already know that Hojo has at least some interest in Cetran lore. That's why even he studied Loveless for a little bit, though he kind of wrote it off as, just myth. How about like every time you're going to visit Hojo to do it, your whole, this sack fellow is stronger than ordinary soldiers. A very fine specimen indeed. Have him ramble off on some other like fact, as if he's kind of like, let me show you how brilliant I am by talking about this random subject in between like your tests.
Yeah.
And at one point he's like, the Sectra once talk about how the planet has guardians who come out when someone dares
the lore
to defy.
be injected into the madness of Hojo. Then if he's gonna do that, then he's got to talk about the most importantest planetary function, Omega, in Chaos.
Oh, most definitely
that would be the kicker right there. I would be like,
that would be
God.
Perfect for setting up for Dirge of Cerberus redemption.
Yes, finally, redemption. Speaking of redemption, really quickly, because I feel like that's a good segue into us talking to Amy about some rebirth.
Well, one of the beforehand, okay, to finish the sentence, I think that despite how much I want that, and it would be satisfying, the reason that I don't think that they're going to do that is because it's burying the lead a little bit, and I do think that they need a little bit of they're gonna sort of really stretch out the mystery until the last part for financial reasons alone. I mean that there's an investment. Could they switch mysteries? That would be nice. I just don't know if they're going to.
Give us another mystery. That would be sick.
I know. Yeah, just what we want. Yeah. Mo, do you have any more thoughts that have come up on Reunion before we just dive into Rebirth and then we'll do questions?
I don't have anything for Reunion, but we hadn't really discussed the Sephiroth Origins thing
in Ever Crisis yet? No, not really. Yeah. Not really. And do you think we'll get little bits of that in Reunion?
Not in Reunion as such. The only reason I'm highlighting it is one of my favourite things about the whole 25th anniversary celebration was being shown young Sephiroth, but the whole having blood on his face and highlighting that he's actually got a different katana.
Yeah.
Like that was a big thing for me, and it goes back to the whole thing about the idea that Philip Hartshorn had about how the Masamune came into Sephiroth's possession in the first place. And I love that idea, and I really hope that they do implement it to some degree. But I think, having seen the fact that they've focused on Sephiroth at that age, he kind of seems young teens. He's got blood on his face, which implies that he's either in battle or, quite specifically at that age, the Wutai War was going on.
Oh yeah.
There's the whole thing about when it cuts to the katana changing, the length of his coat also changes, and it doesn't compare to what the standard soldier uniforms in First Soldier is. So there's a degree of whether or not that's an old version of a trench coat, or whether or not he is actually just wearing a standard soldier uniform. But the big thing is that if you take the idea of what age Sephiroth is, the context of he's in battle or he's in war, and then look at the sword, I think a large part of what the story is going to be. I originally expected that it would be a story of his younger days and his relationship with Gast and all that sort of stuff, but it does actually look as if the story is going to be about how Sephiroth became a hero in the first place and how he acquired the Masamune.
May I be permitted to read something from the Crisis Core Complete Guide, just to underline this?
Yes, please.
And
Okay. Go for it.
how excited I am. For
I'm
young
really
Sephiroth.
excited because I don't know what you're about to say. This is news to me, so
I think
really
this
excited
is
about
an exclusive here.
This is before we can scan late and properly show this off. So consider this a sneak peek, everyone.
Wow.
From the Crisis Core Complete Guide, Sephiroth's profile, background, and point of view summary. Sephiroth, like Angeal in Genesis, is a first-class operator of soldier. He boasts the finest fighting prowess of any soldier in his class, and is arguably the strongest warrior in human history. Now, here's the important part, people. He has always been at the forefront of the battlefield since he was a young boy of less than 10 years old and has achieved countless accomplishments. He has also been celebrated through various promotional campaigns by the Shinra Company and is regarded as a hero by the people.
So Sephiroth stamp, is that what you're saying?
Possibly.
Wow.
But
Possibly.
the important part there is how young he was a soldier.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because if you then go and play Crisis Core, when Genesis is a kid and invented Banora White Juice, you find the little award in his lair before the final boss. Genesis is already a kid talking about Sephiroth the hero and how he wants to serve Sephiroth an apple. So we already have a canon, like if you're playing the game and you're on your way to the final boss, it probably doesn't click in your head how young Genesis is in that newspaper article. But reading that information suddenly becomes lore relevant to Sephiroth directly.
Yeah,
definitely. That's that kind of blows my mind. I think we all expected that it was going to be very young. Because obviously Cloud goes off to be an infantryman at the age of 14, so we knew that was already the thing there. Lolly Bunny did an amazing video about talking about history of the Japanese military and taking on kid soldiers as well. So if you ever get a chance to watch that, I would highly recommend it.
Absolutely. Yes, and there's a lot of great commentary on child soldiers in Final Fantasy VII lore. In general, actually, Final Fantasy.
I'm not gonna just say that this is what was so funny to me, because I knew that you both had so Kai had the information on like a little bit of that Sephiroth sneak peek, and then at the same time, I also MJ, before we even started talking on the stream, we were talking about the references to other mythologies that Sephiroth's journey seems to be mimicking to certain degrees, and then the Philip thing, which has been a clip that has resurfaced. And I was just thinking, with all these things in tandem, I was like, this is probably exactly what this is gonna be. There's no working around it at this point in my mind. It's not a theory I would have ever come up with, but to see like how interconnected these the idea of like the mythology with the already current backstory that is developing with Sephiroth, and even what Kai shared, that's exciting. And honestly, it fits in my mind pretty well into like everything else that we've sort of seen in Final Fantasy VII quite a bit too. So it's just like it's delivering, and also I'm just a fan of Wu-Tai and all this other stuff, which is where the Phil theory kind of comes in heavily, but also where that mythology story most likely comes in to a certain degree.
One little addition to that, and obviously we touched on it behind the scenes, and anyone that's listened to Baby Seal and I talk about this on our Greek mythology podcast, I've already alluded to the fact that there are a huge amount of connections between the story of Achilles and the story of Sephiroth. One of the things that is very clear about Achilles is that at the age of 10 or 11, he was already in competitions. He was outdoing athletes, he was outdoing other combatants, and if kind of on the racetrack in combat, etc. Like he was recognized as being one of the best in the Greek world at the age of 10 or 11. So that ties in again with what's going on here.
Very cool.
So cool. It literally, and that's why I was like, oh my god, MJ's gonna love this, because
that's absolutely amazing.
Literally the rub there. So very
thank you so much,
stuff.
Kai, for sharing that. That's
fantastic.
Been my highlight. That's been the highlight of my chat, or this chat so far for me.
Great news.
I do want to very quickly once again say that if you guys are interested in seeing stuff like this and really getting to know more about it, there's a ton of Final Fantasy VII lore theorizers, people who study the lore, like all of the above, and the information itself. You can find that on the now just open Shinra Archaeology Department open server on Discord. But also we got an insight into just Mo's what Mo is writing, which is very exciting stuff. And just that these two minds here, this is why I said this before the stream. I was like, I'm extremely intimidated by both of the minds that we have here, because we have both of them are very knowledgeable about Final Fantasy VII lore, and then we also have just like Clark and Mo's dynamic of knowing about just a ton about mythology. So that is also something to be looking out for, because I think both of their finds are
just to give a little
insights.
bit of context there as well, is that for those that are not familiar with my work or with kind of what Clark has spoken about in the past as well, is that Kazushige Najima, who's the lead scenario writer for most of the compilation and remake, prior to joining Square, his job was to write video games about Greek mythology, or that were inspired by Greek mythology. So this isn't just plucking ideas out of midair. Right. This is specifically what Najima did for a living.
That's right.
This is very important to sort of his view of elements of Final Fantasy VII. And it's not like just some random, and there's tons of references already that exist of like different mythologies within Final Fantasy VII that Mo knows way more about. There's already a book out about Norse mythology.
That's right.
Insane. So that also is just worth checking out, because there's some really interesting stuff in there too. And there's also a whole video of mine that I did on Norse mythology, which is, I think, when we started really kind of, I think that's what got the ball rolling for both of us. So I was grateful for that. And then I realized how not how shallow the video that I just made was, because there's like, oh, there's a whole pond here. There's a whole ocean of stuff.
So, I had to join that discussion with you just to school you on
Rufus.
You know what you're doing.
Tell you how wrong you were.
Half Cetra, Rufus Shinra.
Oh God, yeah.
Okay.
Let's
Oh,
bring
no.
that up. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay,
that
guys,
exists.
it's time. Okay, so let's talk about Rebirth. First of all, most annoying thing about the title being Rebirth, by far, is that everybody guessed that it was probably either going to be Reunion or Rebirth, and everybody seems to think that they were the only one that did. So if anybody's listening, you weren't. Congrats. Okay. Okay, moving on from that, some fun things about Rebirth. Okay, right off the bat, there was a title. So one of the things that people brought up immediately, I think we even brought it up during our stream. One Winged Angel Rebirth is the name of the track that plays during the Sephiroth fight in Remake Part 1. That's a clue. It's interesting. The katakana for Rebirth and Reverse are the same. That's something that both Night Sky Prince and Audrey have pointed out on Twitter, and a few other people. It's also not the first time that that Nomura has been involved with a project that plays on the similarity there. So that's something to note. It was a short teaser. It showed. It started off with a bunch of cryptic text and showed Sephiroth and Cloud walking. There's a few details that people noticed right away. It's seemingly Nibelheim that they're walking towards. They're walking towards Mount Nibel. This is vaguely confirmed as being a highly recognizable location during the press statement. It is daytime. Sephiroth's hair is slightly different, and then it cuts to what is Sephiroth's endgame. There's dialogue that has been well translated. We can go over that a little bit. And then, there's this dynamic that's being shown off between Zack and Cloud, where it shows pretty definitively the alternative fate that that Zack has. It shows Zack carrying Cloud directly to the gates of Midgar. And so let's just dive in. Sleepezi.
Oh God.
Tell us
God, it's me.
What is happening? What are things that you noticed during the Rebirth trailer that you really wanted to talk about?
So there's definitely a lot that I want to talk about, and I don't want to spiral too deeply into some of those things, just because there are people that need to also speak this stream. So maybe open up the conversation a little bit more after. But I'm just gonna make some general notes.
Just before we get going, why don't we kind of split it into different topics? Like there's the whole Zack thing, there's the Nibelheim bit, and there's maybe the actual name of the game that we can talk about.
All right, let's talk about
the title.
Let's talk about the title. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you kind of already went over that, and that will definitely segue into more of the larger discussions. So, for me, Rebirth, I think a lot of people have already come to the conclusion of, is definitely a reference to Sephiroth in certain cases, because of the name of the song. It's also a part of the Harbingers song. It's the Advent and then the Rebirth, and then we have One Winged Angel Rebirth. It seems very focused on that. I didn't really, and I want to say this on stream because it was something that came to mind right as we were about to start, is that it also seems more specifically highlighting I do think that Rebirth, by the way, I'm going to say this as an overall, is that it's not just about Sephiroth.
Sure.
I think it is like many of the titles encompassing a lot more than just one character, one thing. So spanning many, but I want to focus on Sephiroth specifically because it kind of, to me, answers one of the things that we brought up in the last video that I made, which is the Ode Sephiroth thing. Now, I think completely enhances that specific ending, which is that for those who don't know, Sephiroth used to refer to himself as Ore before his sort of spiral into madness that is, I guess, spurred on by Genova at the onset of the Nibelheim incident. And then from there on out, after the Nibelheim incident, he refers to himself as Watashi, which is more of a general term of association to oneself. It is not like the personal Ore. That's my understanding of it, and I'm sure that there's a lot more context to it. There definitely is. Point being is that by the time that we get to, and this is true for even Advent Children, it's true for like all of these different forms of Sephiroth that we've seen after this event, except for the one that is the most particular, which is the remake ending after at the end of the world / the edge of creation, where Cloud and Sephiroth speak, where Sephiroth has somehow changed back to the Ore representation, or self noting there. That is where I think the rebirth thing starts. I think that is the point in time, and I'm saying that this is just the start of the rebirth sort of discussion that rebirth as a whole, as a game, is probably going to start stepping into. But I think it's mainly highlighting that. And then we also have a ton of other stuff in terms of like the length of the game, a lot of moments where you could also note elements of rebirth being important, which I'm going to probably let other people go into if they want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But mainly the thing that I feel the strongest about, and one of the things that I really think needs to be more addressed now, is that it really solidifies to me the change in Sephiroth. And I think that's huge, because I think a lot of our questions have been like, where is this Sephiroth from? Like, what time period or whatever? Like, who is he? Like, why is he different? We don't necessarily know 100% concrete why, but we now know that there's definitely something going on, like most likely with like how he culminates at the ending of Remake into like that black sort of energy, or the purple energy, and then shows up. That is a part of it. But again, we don't see the change in addressing himself until the very end of the game. So that is what I was so stoked about afterwards. Also, the text being read is
Triggering.
a reference. To me, at least, it's signifying a return of a character, and that's actually something that I do now fully expect. I do fully expect Genesis to show the fuck back up. I have been talking about Genesis for fucking a year and a half and more, and probably at this point. That's probably going to be the thing. And when the reunion thing and all that other stuff coming up, I think that's to ready people, not just because I think everybody knows Zach. I think they want people to know Loveless. I think they want people to see the thematic structure of Crisis Core more specifically because of how much it plays into it, which you've already seen in the trailer, but we'll get to that. That's my piece so far.
Nice.
Just to add to the conversation.
Kai.
Yeah.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the title?
I definitely think that the title of Rebirth is probably mostly centered on Sephiroth's eventual resurrection per the original game. However, much like how Remake, and I'm suspecting this is the case, where the title of Remake is a tongue-in-cheek reference to how the timeline gets rewritten. Rebirth is about, now we are in this new world of Final Fantasy VII. It has been reborn through this rewrite of the Singularity. So we have that going on. I wish I could comment on every little thing from the trailer, but like I said, I haven't had the chance to rewatch the trailers as much as I would like because of the prep work for opening the server itself and the madcap rushing within the workshop itself. So I haven't been able to needle pick everything with the three trailers. Just I can comment on the stuff that stood out to me the most.
Yeah.
Which right now I'll talk about Cloud's soldier uniform, where
Well, wait. We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Let's hear Mo's take on Rebirth as a title.
Okay, so I'm in agreement with both Sleepezi and Kai. I've got a few extra ones to throw in there. Totally in agreement that the name of Rebirth primarily relates to Sephiroth, but I'll come back to that. There's a few other bits. Again, Rebirth, because of the colorization of the word that, in the title, it does seem to be a reference to Genesis, and particularly the Genesis using the rune blade. Using rapier, but with the runes across it. In Crisis Core, which we may see a further reference to within Reunion. There's also Sleepezi touched on the idea of there's a one-winged angel rebirth, which does seem to tie in with sort of who Sephiroth, or the identity of Sephiroth in terms of who it is we're actually dealing with as the main villain moving forward. And Sleepezi also mentioned that there's a Harbinger rebirth, Whispers, or use your words, Mo, Jesus. Arbiters of Fate rebirth. Okay, so this is quite a specific one, right? And I don't know. I've not seen anyone else talking about this. And forgive me if this has actually shown up in one of your videos, Sleepezi, and it's just been so long since I did it.
I forget them too.
Right. The actual track, Arbiters of Fate Rebirth, plays specifically when you first defeat the three Whisper, Kadaj, Loz, and Yazoo, or Ribram, Crokeo, and Viridai. When you defeat them, and the first limb falls off Whisper Harbinger, right? That's specifically when that track begins, right?
This is actually a good question for Clark too, if you know, because I'm less familiar about the timing of that song, but I believe
I've been spending a lot of time working on
this his newest video. Yeah,
this is very, very fresh in my mind, right? So
okay, good. I trust you.
Okay, so specifically that's when the song starts, right? Now, if you look at Whisper Harbinger, we've got the whole thing about there's the purple going on in his brain area, there's a purple going on in his heart area, there's the armor he has around his heart. He's got a left arm and a right arm, okay, which is very similar to Bizarro Sephiroth. So when you start defeating parts of the Harbinger, you're defeating left arm, you're defeating right arm, which then regrows, you're breaking down the armor, you're getting into the core, so on and so forth. Do you know what the original name of Bizarro Sephiroth was?
Oh, let me get my book out.
No, I don't.
Maybe we could wait on Kai getting the book out.
Just tell us.
The Japanese name is Rebirth Sephiroth.
Oh, shut the fuck up. Oh, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up, Mo. Shut the fuck up. Why you gotta drop that kind of shit here? Why you gotta drop that shit in here like that? Fuck you.
Bosses, where are you, bosses?
That's fucking ridiculous. I'm out of here. I'm out.
Right. So
I'm out.
while Sleepezi has his meltdown.
Yep, that is indeed true. Bizarro Sephiroth.
Mo, don't miss.
Ribasu Sephiroth. Rebirth Sephiroth.
Right.
Wow.
So to defeat or for Sephiroth to reappear as One-Winged Angel Rebirth, we have to defeat Bizarro Harbinger, or in the Japanese original it was Rebirth Sephiroth. Okay. So there's an awful lot of parallels going on there with the terms of Rebirth. Now, obviously, Bizarro doesn't show up until the very end of Final Fantasy VII. But in terms of I'm 100% with Kai on this one. That I think from a narrative perspective, because we've been told that it's going to be a trilogy, it makes perfect sense that it's going to be the Northern Crater is where part one will end. I think the red at the bottom of the meteor logo refers to this, that we haven't quite had meteor summoning, but it's a reference to meteor summoning, which obviously takes place when Cloud gives the black materia
Right.
to Sephiroth. While the actual rebirth itself is not quite complete, obviously we see Sephiroth's body being regenerated at the Northern Crater. So there's kind of the connection there. One of the things that's really kind of stood out for me is that the climax of Final Fantasy VII Remake seems to relate to what one of the main parts of the remake references. So we're remaking our destiny, or we're remaking the future, however you want to word it. So this idea is that it's the climax where the name comes in. So following that same principle, the climax of part 2 is where the rebirth element is going to come in, which is, you know, the whole idea of, okay, Sephiroth coming. I personally think it's going to be the physical body of Sephiroth and Ori Sephiroth from the live stream combined to become the big bad of part 3.
Okay.
I don't.
So
I know.
Okay.
I need to first, because I want to add to what you've said, and actually the reverse thing that we talked about was something that was also a player in the end of Remake. The reverse element is also in terms of the party size too, right? So if that Harbinger fight is semi supposed to relate to that sort of hinting of maybe Bizarro / Rebirth Harbinger, maybe that's just more of that ammo to pack in there. Is that there's so much of that being referenced just at the end.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Well,
and the
there
other
is
thing
there's
too,
the whole thing about every time you defeat, or in Final Fantasy VII, every time you defeat part of Bizarro, it gives you the option of switching parties if you've kind of met the criteria.
You're
for
so
that
right.
part of the game.
Why didn't I not think of that at
So
all? I literally never
idea,
thought that.
Same idea in Remake, that every time you defeat one of the Whispers, like the left arm or the right arm or the armor or whatever, like when you defeat the Whisper, it then jumps to Barret and Red 13, who set off their limit breaks to defeat the part of the arm. So there are so many parallels. Yeah,
that's insane. I never, for some reason, I don't know why, even the scenario of them being on different plots of like pieces of like the torn up Midgar.
Yeah,
that's insane. You really blew my mind with that. I also literally, before you said it and before Clark started the call, I said, and this is me, and this is crazy Sleepezi talking right now, I'm sorry. But I would really like to see a return of the early material concept Sephiroth, of the Genova-esque sort of female form in the Crystal Reborn, which I think would perfectly kind of tie in that sort of like, we're not getting just a simple Sephiroth getting the black materia moment. I think we're going to see literally a complete, again, a rebirth of a different Sephiroth, and one that is going to be doing something like far more sinister. The low point of the story is what everybody is sort of on the same page with, I think. It would really solidify just how, like, and with Meteor and all this other stuff, perhaps a much more dire situation than the prior, than the first, the original, the OG. So, and really solidify, wow, like the party's fucked. Like this is really, really bad, and kind of heighten the sense of danger, I think, because I think if you're going to kind of appeal to both the new and the old audience, reinstating a new sense of urgency and fear over like your villain would be, I think, the best idea. Yeah, I love that, Mo. You literally blew my mind.
Okay, so title.
I'm not finished.
Okay.
Just you calm yourself.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, basically, like actually going off what Sleepezi said there, that yeah, now that we've got confirmation that this is a trilogy, so it falls in line with, from a narrative perspective, what you would typically be the 3 acts. So Act 1 is always your introduction and establishing your main plot. So of course, introduction here is Midgar scenario of characters. Main plot is we are remaking Destiny, right? Act 2 is typically where you then develop this main plot and the characters are faced with this sort of critical challenge that they need to overcome. So that the whole idea about, you know, your second film is always characters are at the lowest, it's because this critical challenge has been introduced. Okay, so by the same token, it would to my mind, the most critical challenge that gets faced in the original Final Fantasy VII is the summoning of Meteor, which again ties into this idea of why I think the Northern Crater is where the game's going to end. But there's one other rebirth.
Okay.
And Clark, you'll already know this as well, but quite commonly, in terms of kind of mythology or however you want to look at it, there's this idea of the cycle of life or the cycle of seasons. It's quite commonly attributed to, like, you know, birth, life, death, rebirth. Okay, now those words should jump out straight away with respect to Genova. So we've got Genova, birth, life, death. In the original game, we've now, from Remake, we've got Genova Dreamweaver, who, outside of the English localization, both in the Japanese and other European languages, referred to it as Genova Beat or Genova Pulse, which is a heartbeat kind of idea.
Yep.
So we're the kind of following this same arc or cycle. Genova Death in the original game, you fight in the Whirlwind Maze, which would then suggest that whatever comes after Genova Death is Genova Rebirth. So I think there's again the Genova link in there with the rebirth. So it could be going back to what you guys were saying about actually having a Genova in a different form. I personally think it would be massively haunting to see her back in her ancient form, like her Sephiroth form.
I would drop the controller. I would be like, I'm not fighting that.
Switch the game off. I'm going home. So yeah, like I do actually think that the word rebirth relates specifically to Sephiroth being regenerated at the Northern Crater, and that's where the game will end, kind of idea. But there's also a lot more of other potentials in there. The rebirth of Zack, if you want to throw that one in.
Sure, yeah. Okay, well let's just get into the next segment then. We're past title. Opening shot of the game. Sephiroth and Cloud are walking up to what appears to be the gates of Nibelheim. What is happening? 1, it's daytime. 1, they're walking. 2, there's nobody else around. 3, Sephiroth has what looks like frayed hair or split ends, almost as if maybe it had been raining, something of those, something like that, or it could just be nothing, right? What do you guys? What is being depicted there? Is that simply the Nibelheim flashback? If so, why is it daytime? Go ahead. We'll start with Mo again.
Okay. I don't think this is them approaching Nibelheim. I think this is them in the morning afterwards heading for Mount Nibel. Obviously, there's the whole bit of speculation about why are the infantrymen and why Tifa not there. But I think as they come over this ridge, there's the distance. You know, there's the 2 different versions. Like there's the walking towards the little bridge, and then there's the bit later when they kind of look into the valley. But the distance bar is very close together, so it actually looks as if they've just turned the corner and then they're at the valley section. So I personally think this is them making the journey between Nibelheim town and the valley where the next thing is one of the beautiful things about the compilation is that using the limited space that they had before Crisis in particular, there was quite a lot of world building that went on. And one of the things that was introduced in Before Crisis is that Shinra employees used a ropeway system, which makes a lot of sense because you would expect your most valued employees to hike up the mountain, a very dangerous mountain, every single day, and then back down again, or there would be living quarters at the facility, neither of which really seem feasible. So the ropeway system makes sense. And if you look at the valley, there's a huge big tower beside the building in the right hand corner that looks as it's like a massive pylon, but there's also a giant Mako pipe there. So why would they have an electricity pylon? Which tells me that that's the ropeway, or suggests to me that that's the ropeway. And that's like, according to Before Crisis, the ropeway gets damaged, which is why you have to climb the mountain. But that's. I think based on these buildings, we're not approaching Nibelheim. We've actually been to Nibelheim, and now we're heading up the mountain.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what it felt like to me. More like the sort of almost not the cave before the pool of Mako and the tree and the blossoming materia like segment. It felt like right before that. It felt like the start of our kind of trek up.
And then that very likely the camera could just pan out and you'll see the rest of the people. Yeah.
Right. And this is something that we also, I think, talked a little bit about. I don't know if it was on stream or off stream, but just like the amount of time that these characters are going to be spending together, and sort of like what Mo is sort of highlighting is that they're like, this world feels, and this sort of mission feels so much more fleshed out, just even from the little that we've seen,
right?
So much that it's like this is not going to be like 4 screens of just us like going up the mountain or whatever. It's like we're gonna spend like time with Sephiroth, Cloud, Tifa. Well, not necessarily Cloud, but depending on the way that the story goes, it's gonna be a lot more than what we just.
Think about it this way: like the original story tells us that the reactor workers went missing. Okay, that makes sense. Why would you send Sephiroth? When we've obviously the reason they send Sephiroth and Zack is because they've obviously got a very, very top secret location in terms of Genova's chamber, right? Reactor workers go missing. Okay, cool. Where do the reactor workers live in Nibelheim? Because it's not a particularly big town.
Sure, like there could be, yeah.
So in Crisis Core, it expands on, so basically that's what I'm getting at with this, is that surely the buildings that we are seeing in front of us probably relate to the reactor workers who are now all missing.
This is kind of where I was thinking too when I first saw it. I was like, this is probably going to just be a Shinra outpost, sort of like little camp. I didn't really put together like the whole trek of the mission going up and the Mako reactor workers, but I was like, it would make sense that there would be like an outpost for them that isn't necessarily just high. It's not just them in Nibelheim, it's like Shinra forces are here. The disturbance of the Mako reactor is a big deal. Like, it wouldn't just be like, it would be something that would be a little bit larger scale than just a truck going down. There'd be something more to it than just that.
Right.
That's so cool. I don't know. I don't know if we want to go into speculation about like what that would even be like too much. I don't want to like jump ahead of the horse here, but essentially everything that like Mo said, as far as just that first impression, is very similar. I wonder if like the bridge isn't going to just break, but like that dragon is going to be just like all over the place now, like cutting off arms, like each section. And then he's just like following you like through that'd be cool. Like ongoing boss fight.
There's more than one dragon, though. That's kind of again Before Crisis, and the whole point of the Turk having to turn back is that there's dragons in front of the reactor.
Yeah.
One of the things that's is likely going to happen here on your trek is that you will encounter multiple emerald dragons, which actually are the cause of the reactor workers
Right.
going missing by the sounds of it, because the whole it's never fully explained. In the game, there's a kind of reference to the Mako going up and there being monsters there, but in the unused text, or it might actually be the early text, basically Sephiroth goes off in this monologue about how excess Mako attracts monsters.
Right, which is also
So-
confirmed in a bunch of like other material as well.
Yeah, so the whole idea about Genova being there and the Maconoids is that there's excess Mako getting routed to that location, which will attract monsters, which in turn then kill the the reactor workers. So yeah, it's never fully explained within the original Final Fantasy VII, but you can actually work it out from all the bits and pieces across the compilation.
I mean, the way that this presents is that the flashback itself will be a pretty substantial section. Like just seeing that little visual bit rendered in engine lets us know that the pacing of the scene is gonna be pretty expanded upon. And given the title, I'm with you as well on the ending place, which means how long is this game gonna be?
Yeah.
How long is this game going to be if we're also factoring in this other alive character? Do things get cut? What does this mean? So I'm, you know,
Yeah,
this is quite a heavy project now.
One of the other things to remember is that as soon as the celebration stream ended, the Square Enix released all those sort of little kind of information beats from
Right.
and Hamaguchi specifically said you can play Rebirth on its own without any background context.
Nomura said that.
Oh, was it? Sorry, my mistake. Nomura said that, which implies then that the Nibelheim incident itself will cover everything you need to know about Cloud and Sephiroth's relationship prior to then restarting. So it also suggests then that we're getting a pretty hefty Nibelheim flashback.
Agreed. What are your thoughts, Kai?
My thoughts for what we see in the trailer come in two parts. Part one, the buildings and the lead up to where this scene is taking place. I definitely agree with MJ that this is on the way to the Mount Nibble reactor. It's not approaching the town itself. However, with the way Cloud looked, with his mercenary getup and not the soldier uniform like we saw in Remake, I have to wonder if this is exactly the flashback. Part of me, now this is me leaning into the idea that, you know, Remake is going to be the part where the train has officially jumped the tracks and it's going to go into its own fun direction.
Sure.
We're going to visit all the same locations, but things are going to be different. One of the things we saw in Remake is that Sephiroth steps up his game with the use of Mimic.
Right.
For those who are unfamiliar, by the way, Mimic is the official name to Sephiroth's and Genova's ability to read minds and to project what they want you to see. You don't have to have Genova cells in you to be affected by Mimic. You could just be an ordinary person, and all of a sudden you're hallucinating. Say in like Remake that you're in the middle of Midgar and it's Meteor. That was Mimic.
Right.
So in Rebirth, I think that is Sephiroth dragging Cloud back through his memories and beginning the process of breaking Cloud early.
I definitely think that that's happening. I think I see that happening in the plot. I'm not sure if that's necessarily specifically what's being depicted. And the reason I would say that there's a chance it's not, that it's just a pure Nibelheim flashback, is that in the OG, Cloud had a single pauldron, and in Ever Crisis, the depictions of the Nibelheim flashback do have him with a single pauldron, and there's
also one that pointed out to me as well, because I had this same thought, Kai. My thought was like straight away that look, they've changed something, because in chapter 8, or at the end of chapter 8 in Remake, there's the flashback that Cloud has, or the dream that he has about home.
That's what I was talking about.
And that's what I'm talking about too. So the difference between those memories is Claudia and Cloud's memory, like the memory that Cloud has there, is an authentic one. It is not part of his flashback monologue. It is not one that he has manufactured when telling other people about it. I think that it'll be a denotation between what's really happening and what's being confabulated by Cloud during his narration of the Nibelheim incident.
Okay, sorry, just to jump back in there. Well, first of all, to comment there, I guess what you mean is that because Cloud genuinely believes that he was imagining himself in Zack's uniform, because like that scene wouldn't have taken place in a soldier uniform. Second to that, Viz of the Cosmo Canyon Observatory actually pointed out that in chapter 2 of Remake, when Cloud is envisioning himself lying on the ground with his home on fire, he puts out an arm and he's actually got the changed, like the kind of spiked bracelet around his hand,
right,
as well. Which, so there's actually precedent already within Remake for both his mercenary outfit and Zack's soldier outfit. Right.
So yeah, they could go either way, and to me it makes sense that that he is projecting himself onto Zack's experiences when he's narrating it, whereas what was happening with him and Claudia was his genuine memory, right? So yeah, I could definitely see either way. But that being said, I mean, I do think that like personally, the concept of Sephiroth sort of really amping up his manipulation of Cloud being this extremely persistent part of the story is absolutely going to happen. I mean, like the juxtaposition of what is Sephiroth's endgame, in the like that is a title question in the trailer. It's really important to the story. It's almost like the answer to what his endgame is the title of the game. His endgame is rebirth. And I'm going to say it here that I think that his rebirth will come at the hands of Cloud. That I still think that the villain that we see at the end of this game is going to be, like the final boss fight, will be a fully corrupted Cloud. And I know that's not what people want, but it's what I think we'll see.
I've predicted this all the way back. Aerith is not going to die. We're going to lose Cloud and have to regain him.
In part 3. Right.
In part 3.
I'm not sure about Aerith's overall fate, but I really nothing would surprise me at this point.
It would be the perfect swap out.
You have a question?
Yeah, no, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I have a question. What do you think about that, Sleepezi? All the things that were said. Oh, thank you, Sleepezi, for asking. I will now respond to everything that everybody has said.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
What are you talking about?
I'm sorry. Did Baby Seal talk like only 10% of the time, and that threatens your 90-10 ratio?
What I was really just doing there is just because I've been sitting on my hands and I'm impatient. But I literally love this conversation so far, because there's just so much interesting stuff that's being said, and it's one of the very first things that we talked about together, Baby Seal, which was the fact that the whole idea of Sephiroth not just being in the flashback, but more like, and this is what happened here, and like it's not just like the memory of Sephiroth or the flashback of Sephiroth, but in actual Sephiroth like feeding, like it's like you're not supposed to be saying anything, Sephiroth. That's what I want to have happen. Is like we're in the flashback and he starts doing things in the flashback that you're just like he's just as here as Cloud is retelling the story.
Right.
And just to fully feel the weight that like Sephiroth is way more present and and I think people complained about it in the first game. But once they start to see like the intention of that, because this has always been my position that it's a Sephiroth becoming more and more like real, like manifesting through Remake. He's showing up more, and then we see him at the end with the Ore thing, but now it's like he's here and he has way more of a grip on Cloud than he ever did. And then there was just one other thing that I wanted to mention about this was something to do with the flashback itself and Sephiroth. Oh, I wanted to say that this would perfectly mirror the first game's start, and this is what I've been saying as well to Clark is that and everybody sort of said this about Nibelheim is that it is the tutorial section of the game. But one of the other things that happens during the bombing mission is we get the feather of Sephiroth showing up, which is like that's not supposed to be there. I think they need to do that same thing again, and that's what Nibelheim is the tutorial. This is how the game plays, but then interject that presence of Sephiroth, but in a super profound way, where it's not like just a little nudge, like a feather. We need to see like some radical. I want the first part of this game to put the fear in me that this is like setting up for the worst of the worst scenario. That's what I want to feel like, not just the mystery of the situation, but like the full on. This is like Cloud is in serious fucking trouble. Like he needs help. We gotta do something about it. Like I want the agency to be so much more present in that. So it's just speaking. I just wanted to add my sense of the narrative perspective of that and how the game is already being presented, and even in which we're probably going to move on to anyway, is like the dialogue is also very heavy, reminiscent of showing us the things that aren't changing. This isn't changing. This is here. This is the same. This is Nibelheim. We're in going to Mount Nibel. Like they're softening us up. It feels like they're kneading us into soft dough, so that they can just like put us into like a really a very exposed situation. So I'm really excited to see what they do with that, but I'm more excited more than anything about Remake and Rebirth that Sephiroth's presence is going to be so off the wall, and I'm so stoked.
I love that. I really love that idea. It just been we were talking there about they have to do something radical there to show us that the retelling has changed, like something like a third infantryman.
Yes. It's like what are you doing there? You're not supposed to be there. Stop it.
But yeah, I love that. I love that idea.
So okay, we are at nearly the 3-hour mark, and so we don't have a ton of time left. So what I'd like to do is have audiences start asking questions, and if you could make sure to highlight those questions so that they stick out, either by tagging me or by highlighting them using the highlight feature, that would be good. In the meantime, thank you, the Sphere Hunter, for being here. You're several of our favorite peoples.
Who's that?
That's the Sphere Hunter? Yeah. Really appreciate you being here. We're just 3 hours deep into a conversation about Final Fantasy VII Remake.
My hair isn't falling out after this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Definitely relaxed.
Yeah.
One thing that I would like to just bring up about the Nibelheim part just before we move on is Tifa's line about her feeling as if Cloud is accusing her of being an imposter. And the reason I want to bring this up is that it suggests very much that the context of this is that, well, Cloud has said, I thought you died at the reactor. And Tifa saying, well, I didn't die. Are you suggesting I'm an imposter? But it feels very confrontational, right? And one of the things that I picked up on was that there is no indication at all in Traces of Two Pasts that there was any confrontation between Cloud and Tifa after the retelling, because Tifa's chapter obviously takes place after Cloud has retold the Nibelheim incident. So you would expect there that if she's had that confrontation with Cloud, that Aerith would have asked about it, but they don't. She actually just agrees with, or basically Tifa says something to the effect of, yeah, it's exactly as Cloud retold it.
Interesting.
So this question hasn't been asked yet, so the confrontational line that we're hearing, I suspect, is far later in the game. And
wow.
Right? And I'll come back to this because I think this takes place at the same time as another line in the trailer. And I'll explain why in a minute.
Okay. All right. Well,
does anybody think that the Tifa Genova encounter is going to happen in the Traces of Two Paths? I want to bring that up too.
Yes, I do. And like I do actually think so. So for people that don't know what we're talking about, because it's not even translated yet, there's a official novel written by Nojima about Aerith and Tifa's sort of backstories. It's written from the perspective of both Tifa and Aerith telling different people what happened in their childhood, before the events of Remake. The Aerith chapter involves her telling Tifa about what it was like escaping the HQ and everything that happens with Elmira, etc. The Tifa episode actually goes through like her time in Midgar, healing from the injury of the Nibelheim incident, but it does also talk about her life in Nibelheim growing up, etc. It's a really good book. It hasn't officially been translated yet, but it is due out. The official localization is due out this year still. So hopefully that comes out. There's a ton that we can talk about, though, particularly in those. But I do want to, because we're really running up on time, answer some questions. And I do want to answer Sphere Hunter's question, which is, do we think that Vincent will get an intermission type DLC chapter? I'll answer first. I now think that that the game is long enough, that part 2 is probably going to be long enough for us to get a somewhat expansive look at Vincent's gameplay in Remake. Nomura was very explicit when intermission was announced that there would be no more DLC for any of the Remake projects until the completion of the games. It would not be the first time he's lied, or I don't know if lie is the right word. He can be
maybe not misspoke.
He can be inconsistent. He can be inconsistent. I personally think that it's more likely that between Rebirth and the third title, we will get some game that's either like a remaster remake of Dirge of Cerberus or something, or a game dedicated to Vincent than DLC. Personally, that's my thoughts. What are you guys' thoughts? Anybody who wants to answer?
I'll go, I guess. I would, out of all of the characters that I've always wanted to have like that sort of like Yuffie treatment, it is Vincent. And whether or not it happens, sort of going back to like what you said, Clark, is that it seems like Nomura has sort of clarified that this isn't a thing. But if I want, like, if I had to choose, I would absolutely want it. The likelihood of it, and just because this is also going back to me saying that like Remake feels like a smaller thing now, is because it's seemingly lined up that Rebirth is going to be way bigger than we initially, or at least I anticipated. It almost seems like too good to be true. So I'm trying to be careful about that. But if anybody would have like the coolest remake combat and want that featured sort of in the way that Yuffie's combat is so well featured in the DLC with like movement specifically, I would 100% want Vincent. I would definitely get it.
Oh
Just
yeah.
imagining him going into that cape mode in Advent Children and having like fluid motion
Yeah.
and then having
Bayonetta.
like a double jump. I
Ba-
always envisioned him being like a both an assistant, like an assist to other party members, like where you can jump to another party member and like move them around the field like more easily. It's like more strategic. And then the double jump feature like in DOC and obviously shooting would be sick.
I love
So
Bayo
I've thought
style
about this.
characters, and and Vincent would be a Bayonetta style character. That's what I want to see. Yeah,
That'd be cool. That'd be really cool.
I would totally agree with that. If we're going to get a DLC about any character, I hope the DLC would be about Vincent. I specifically hope if I could choose any subplot to expand on, it would be the Project Genova, the Nibelheim Manor. So I would love a Vincent DLC that focused on that. I'm kind of with BBC on this, that I don't think we will get a DLC between parts 2 and parts 3, because realistically they would want to focus on the development of part 3, but they might end up in a scenario exactly as they have here, that if we're speculating that story elements of Rebirth will have to be tied into what's going on in Crisis Core, to remake Crisis Core to tell that story kind of makes sense if that's actually true. Same thing with part 3, that depending on what Sephiroth's endgame is, we might require Surge of Cerberus. And this goes right back to what Sleepezi's original theory on what Sephiroth's endgame is, which I would love if they did this. And basically what I'm talking about here is that if Sephiroth's endgame is taking control of Omega, then Surge of Cerberus would be a good way of actually telling the story of what Omega is, if they were to do it that way.
Agreed. Kai, do you have any input?
I think most of the bases have been covered. I would love a Vincent DLC. I wouldn't find it incredibly likely because he's still in his self-exile down in Shinra Manor. But if they did a DLC where we get a fully expanded, like, this is what happened during the Genova project and Vincent's relationship with Lucrezia. Oh, I would adore that. That is a story that needs to be told. Dirge was not the best place to tell it because they gave a very truncated version of it. Actually, no, Dirge was the best place to tell it, but they didn't go into it enough. So a DLC that tells that story, I would love. They'll probably, I agree that we'll probably see the DLC after part 3, and they'll be expanding on different story elements. Anything else that I would like to see from Zack's parents?
That would be
Wow.
Might get that in part 2 though, but
yes.
Okay, fair enough. Ours has a question here. With the potential for Rebirth to be huge, is it feasible that Square might do something that it hasn't done in years? Create a single title that spans more than one disc? Like the way data works now, it's just it's not quite likely. I don't think that there are games actually, by the way, that do come on more than one Blu-ray now, but they just, one is an install disc and one is a data disc. So I think we would see something more like that. Jonah Green, thank you so much. Wow. Really appreciate. Wow. Really appreciate
Jonah
that.
Green.
Thank you so much.
I actually kind of want to disagree with you a little bit
on multiple discs.
on I get out. You know what? I maybe misunderstood the question. I was thinking like carryover, like save files, but multiple discs, maybe not. Maybe not.
Oh yeah, no, I that's a good question. I haven't even thought about like.
No, this is
Yeah.
okay, wait a second. Because I thought about this, right? Part 3 development already started, right?
Most likely, yes.
And they were saying how interconnected like they've sort of woven the story, that they have to, there's like so much planning in terms of like how this whole thing is sort of interwoven, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think the reason for that is because they've planned on carryover for part 2 and 3. I don't think that they can do it for part 1. I don't think it matters. Almost, I think it will matter because we're in the world map for part 2 and 3, where it's like, okay, well, have you done this thing? Have you accomplished this? Who have you spoken to? Who haven't you? I think the game is going to impress on that level of that's how thought out all of this is at this point. Is that it's going to know, like, the game needs to know whether or not you filled out certain criteria for certain things that happen for part 2 and 3.
Yeah, I have not thought about it a lot. That's a good point. So that's a good reformation of that question. What do you think?
But no, for multiple discs.
What do you think, guys?
To be honest with you, I'm not tech savvy at all, so
Okay.
I would. I don't know. I genuinely don't know the answer to that.
Fair enough.
Maybe for the nostalgia purposes, multiple discs would be cool. Yeah. Swap it out. You'd be like, what? I would be excited about that. I don't know why.
I definitely want to answer Jonah Green's question, which is, it's the thing. It's the thing that I immediately think about, that I'm scared about. It's question.
What keeps you up at night?
How much of the story do you think can be streamlined, skipped, while still maintaining the major plot beats from the OG, such as leaving Wutai in Part 3 or passing through the Nibel Mountains straight to Rocket Town? And I think that's a big concern, like especially at the scale this game now seems to have. I mean, what gets left out, and can you leave out things like Fort Condor, and is Wutai being forced to a different? I think the thing to do is exactly like Jonah Green is suggesting with the question, which is there are things that don't necessarily need to be where they are for pacing reasons, and if anything can be pushed to the next game, let's do it. Simply because what we're going through now, especially if it ends where we think it's going to end, I mean, that's the bulk of the narrative, like the entire bulk of the narrative. And I'm not saying they can inflate things in Part 3; they certainly can. What do you guys think about moving stuff around? Touch nothing? How dare you?
You don't talk about Genesis and all of these other Crisis Core things without feeling like maybe things are going to be a little bit different. I think there will have to be some shifting around, just because of the way that the story might get told. I think also it would be a really, really trippy thing to do to somebody who's wanting to go one place and then realizing that they have to go somewhere completely different. Like, I think that they can use this to their advantage rather than it just being a, like, this is now just where the story's going sort of thing, I think that, again, the shock value that they have at their disposal is now that anything can be different. And when something is, they can drive that stick into the heart of whoever they want to upset, to not intentionally like make mad, but you know what I mean, like to maybe stir some feelings around, and maybe make things a little bit more exciting for players that have already played the game. It's also good to mention that it's very clear that, like, at least like even Wutai, for instance, there's a lot to cover that's new. at least to the OG's point of view, that will probably happen there. A lot of Avalanche stuff might happen there. A lot of the history, we've already gotten hints of it with Godo and his imprisonment and intermission. Like there's a ton of stuff that like, and the Republic of Junon, which we don't even have time to talk about. Like there is so much that these areas now have to offer that they almost feel like, I hate to say it, but like their own fucking Midgar.
Yeah, they're impossibly
like,
deep. Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine that these zones will be so heavily packed and have it all be new and have it all stay in the same place.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah.
And I don't think it will be bad, though. I think it will be good, and it will serve the story.
Okay.
Fair enough, yeah. Off the back of that, from a narrative perspective, I think Wutai is probably the only place you could realistically cut in terms of like if you don't go to Rocket Town, if you somehow meet Sid in another way, you could probably cut Rocket Town as well and have the Temple of the Ancients thing kick off after you get back to Nibelheim. I can't really see it other than that.
That's a really good point.
Junon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He could be instead of Shinra having to go all the way to Rocket Town to recruit him. They dragged him all the way to Junon. Hey, we're giving you your baby back, Captain Sid of the Shinra Air Force.
That's so true. They could move stuff forward too. I wasn't thinking about it like that. I was more like just rearranging, but like having it be like events not playing out the same way. But there's also like that's such a good point to bring up is that certain characters don't have a lot going on in certain places during the game. Like if you talk to like Sid, sometimes he's just like, well, and then it's just like, that's it. You don't need to be here. Like maybe that also would benefit the story. Is not having characters around for certain events that maybe they don't need to be around for. I know that might sound like really like damaging, but
well, it really depends on the context of how they get around. Like for example, the whole reason we go to Rocket Town is to get the tiny Bronco, and you need the tiny Bronco to get to the Temple of the Ancients and to Bone Village. So it really depends on what the mechanics are for kind of moving around.
Mm-hmm.
Wutai has already been introduced in Remake and quite substantially introduced in Intermission. So, you know, unless you wanted to kind of keep up references to it, throughout Rebirth and then have a huge scenario play out, you know, as well as the huge materia stuff, you've got, well, how does Wutai react to the summoning of Meteor? How does Avalanche react to the summoning of Meteor? How does Shinra deal with that? That could be this whole other story that takes place in the third game, you know, if you wanted to cut it out of the second one. So yeah, like there's, with the exception of Wutai, it's hard. You would really have to quite significantly affect the course of the story, I guess. Or kind of reroute it significantly to avoid having to, do you know what I mean? Like we have to go to the Gold Saucer. We have to go to Cosmo Canyon.
You would have to have like a through line narrative of the change, not just like it being like mixed around you, because certain things allow for certain events triggers others. Narrative events, both also like traversing like the world and all that. You would have to have like reasonable answers.
Yeah,
exactly. And the whole idea about getting to the point where the party starts to question Cloud, that only happens at Nibelheim when they get back to Nibelheim. So if you're going to go all the way to Nibelheim, you might as well go to Rocket Town.
You might as well just take that extra step square. You gotta learn a little bit more in Nibelheim.
Maybe. I still think there's a chance.
What?
I still think there's a chance that gets moved outside. But okay.
What?
I know. Okay, so
we'll talk about that later.
Rebellion has asked this question a couple times, and I said I'd get to it, and it's Rebirth, and the title's red color are not related to Aerith's death and the passage, or I guess they're asking, do you think that it's possible that Rebirth's red color are related to Aerith's death and the passage to the live stream, which according to her is like a rebirth? Do you think that's a possible interpretation?
Yeah. I think that the idea of rebirth could apply to some aspect of Aerith, but I also think that the red color has an association with meteor. And this is something else that I failed to mention. It also looks like the title for rebirth is not just the red, but also it looks like the meteor is like entering the atmosphere of like
Sure,
of Gaia too, and maybe even like hitting the planet. So there's that sort of implication. But then we also, I think for me at least, something that triggers when I see the color red in Remake specifically is the red Cetra in the mural,
which
seems to have no kind of
context
answer at this point.
Yeah.
I wonder if that is going to start playing into like maybe some Temple of the Ancients stuff. When we get to that part of the game, maybe there will be like some more color correlation to the Cetra, to the meteor, to the title of Rebirth, which would play into like Sephiroth's sort of plan of like the meteor and hitting the planet and all that, which I think actually would be a really, I just thought that we're going to maybe get that scene, or we are going to get that scene most likely. I keep saying most likely. We are going to get that Temple of the Ancients scene where we see the mural, and that's going to be, I'm just having that weird moment. I do think that the red Cetra, though, in the mural also is a reference to Aerith as well in some shape or form. So I don't put it past it that there will be multiple correlations to those. So
fair enough. Okay, and quick, does anybody have any quick?
I would you just off the back of that. I would, my interpretation of the color is it's quite a threatening color.
Sure.
Meteor and Genesis both being a villain would make sense. It's also the color of blood, which I assume is where the question was really stemming from. The problem with that is that first of all, we don't 100% know that Aerith's actually going to die. Second of all, there was no blood in Aerith's murder originally.
Yeah.
And whether or not they actually have blood this time around as well might be a ratings issue. So my answer to the question is probably not related to Aerith for that reason.
Oh, we'll see blood.
What you're throwing down with the more, and they also said that this is going to be way darker, so that red implication might be that step that they're taking, which I would be super thrilled about.
All right, so I'm going to do two more questions. One is from Turquoise Hammer, who thanks again, Turquoise, for all the stuff that you do.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Supposing a single revised timeline, what do you think happens to Cloud 2? Oh, okay, I should have. Okay. Personally, I think that we're looking at a revised timeline, and I personally don't think there's duplicates of anybody. And it's either going to be explained away with time travel nonsense, because I don't think any of these authors are quantum theorists. But if not, it'll be, if they give a logical explanation, it'll be that in a whisperless series of events, Remake killed the party. Because if we've eliminated the whispers, if you recall, the whispers prevented the death of every single party member, either by reversing a death or by like preventing a bridge from killing them, etc. So if the Beagle party has wandered into the Terrier timeline and been protected through the singularity events, they've entered a timeline that they were dead in. That's how I think they might try and explain it. I know that sounds, lame, but it's because it is lame. But I think that so little focus will be put on that just for the purpose of telling the story that they want, which is, here is the alive party in an altered timeline. That's what I think they're going to do. I'm personally not a person that thinks that we're, looking at an MCU type of multiverse sort of thing. Yeah.
Fair enough.
What do you guys think, Ken?
I typically agree with that. I think it would overcomplicate things to have more than one of them, because Toriyama does actually make reference to it. I think in the Material Ultimania Plus, he's asked specifically about there being two clouds, and his answer is that just assume they do not occupy the same time and space.
Mm-hmm.
But you would have to then extend that to the other 4 party members, because all 4 of them would effectively be like that. But that might actually explain why Aerith is missing at the end of intermission. This whole idea of like, has Zack gone back and Aerith's actually dead? The extent of Cloud's Mako poisoning might then suggest that he doesn't really make it either. You know, Barrett and Tifa might perish in the Sector 7 platefall, and I'm assuming you could write away what was going on with Red 13. So yeah, I'm in total agreement that if they are actually going to address it at all, it'll probably be addressing it in such a way that all the characters die.
I do want to even quickly just throw in that even though there might be a unified timeline, there's definitely some sort of narrative disconnect between the characters.
Sure,
that is clearly happening with like Zack and the rest of the party, and also Zack's sort of role in Destiny itself seems to also be in question because of this idea of maybe failing to accomplish something, which is sort of referenced or at least seemingly hinted at the end of the trailer. I think that, and even if like the Aerith dialogue isn't necessarily directly commenting on like Zack itself and could be the reference to an OG line more akin to Cloud in that aspect, I think the reason why they're showing Zack during that line is to further emphasize that there's something perhaps missing from Cloud, or some disconnect that Cloud is going through that has something to do with this sort of reappearance of Zack, or his saving, the fact that he was saved. I am more thinking that that's going to be more of a narrative sort of choice that they make, rather than a like physical, like they're maybe separated. I'm still more on the leaning side of that Zack is somehow a little bit off of where everybody else is. There's some sort of disconnect, desync in that aspect to me still. So
right, and you know that seems to be the easiest way to tell the story, at least. And
it would make the most sense.
Yeah, the easiest way to tell the story. And
that's not necessarily the case, you know.
Also, we're seeing this. We're seeing that they really highlighted what is fact, what is fiction. Like, we're really gonna play into the mystery of us not knowing what is happening, and I think that's going to get escalated to a pretty high degree throughout the rebirth experience. So one last question, guys. So if you guys got them, now's the time. Kai, do you have any sort of closing thoughts?
I have thoughts, but they relate to stuff that I wanted to talk about way back when we were touching on, like, say, Crisis Core. But closing thoughts on Rebirth. I'm just generally excited. I do think we're gonna go in a new direction. Even if the tone's gonna probably get darker, I do think the story is building up to be like a final bow to Final Fantasy VII in general. Like, everybody gets a role. Everybody's gonna get involved in the final act of the story, which is why whenever you like see me on the live stream, and most assuredly now on the Shinra Archaeology server, I'm going to advocate and say that I don't think Aerith is going to die. We're going to probably experience her death, but not in the way of, like, say, she's permanently dead. Say, again, Sephiroth is upping up his taunting and mimic game. Have him show her death through mimic. Have Cloud think he's experiencing it, and then pull the rug under the player and go, all these things have yet to happen. but they need not.
Hmm.
You help.
I'm
together,
interested
we can
in that,
change
and I
this
think that
destiny.
definitely feels very much like that, and that excitement also resonates with me 100%.
So those are my main rebirth thoughts. I'm gonna just touch on the reunion thing that I wanted to mention real quick because
yeah.
I've been sitting on this from the very
No,
start of the stream.
go for it.
When you said that, I think it was Baby Seal that said this, that there was no reunion event in Crisis Core. That's not necessarily true.
Right. Well, it's like it's the concept of the reunion is like the project reunion, which is just we actually really hadn't even heard about until the picturing the past story happened after Sephiroth went into the live stream, correct?
Here's the thing. One, the Ultimania Omega actually implies Hojo arranged the entire incident at the Mount Nebo reactor, knowing that Shinra would send Sephiroth to go and investigate.
Interesting.
Hoping to trigger a reunion event early.
Oh.
Hojo really is like the worst motherfucker on the planet.
Now,
so that's perfect. That's perfect.
Now, here's the other thing. Throughout all of Crisis Core, if you do Hojo's quest line, he will comment about Zack being stronger than usual. That he is he's not on the same league as Sephiroth or Angeal, though you could argue he does by the time of the end of Crisis Core by being able to beat Genesis, but we're getting into splitting hairs.
Right.
The important part is, and this is the controversial part, but when Genesis is added into the Nibelheim incident, what's going on in that scene? You have 3 of the most powerful soldiers, 3 who could be considered the closest to Genova at that moment alive, in the same room, just a few steps away from Genova's chamber. What do you think Hojo would say that is?
Maybe a reunion, yeah. That could be. That's a good point.
A rebirth.
That's a good point.
No, I messed
that
it
is
up.
Reunion, and that is why Genesis is added.
Interesting.
Isn't there like one of those Crisis Core lines where he is like Healer is like what a lovely like oh no, I'm thinking of Remake. This is where my brain has turned to mush. I'm thinking of Remake. What a touching reunion, all of them together. Or
that's fair.
Sephiroth's meeting, but I was thinking of the Genesis meeting with like Zack, and I guess there's a moment like that during the Genesis Zack final fight where he's like, oh, like you have like the spirit of Angeal and you're a part of Sephiroth, so it's like technically we're all together again. It's just like, all right, weirdo.
And the exact purpose of that is, first of all, Genesis reveals that Sephiroth is a monster, and second of all, he actually tells him that, or he asks for Sephiroth cells. So the entire point of the scene is to talk about Genova cells.
That's true. Oh my god.
All right,
dude, they're gonna touch base, and then things are gonna go so awry. I'm so ready for that game to fall apart.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna end a question with a question from subtext. In the trailer, it seems Cloud talks to Zack, indicating he remembers him before the live stream scene. Will he, or is that a trailer red herring? I'll let you guys answer.
Oh, this is exactly what I wanted to bring up. Thank you, subtext.
God, we've unleashed.
Right. I've actually got quite a specific answer to this. Do you guys want to go first? If you have an answer.
No, you go first, please.
Right. Okay. Cool. So I'll ask a question as well. Right. As part of the line, Cloud says, and he's speaking to Zack. I think it's actually confirmed in the Japanese version that he's actually speaking to Zack in this line, and he refers to or says to Zack, like, where are you? You were here 5 years ago. So the here element of it
Mm-hmm.
suggests that they're in Nibelheim.
Nibelheim. Yeah.
Okay, so where do you think that this question is being asked, or when do you think this
In-
question is being asked?
Calm flashback.
Okay, what about you,
Kai.
Kai?
I definitely agree. I've been sitting on the fence on whether or not Zack and Cloud had been basically yeeted forward in time to the events of Final Fantasy VII, or slowly coming to the feeling that they did arrive in Midgar at that end of September following the last battle, that last stand, and they've just been hunkered down because, Shinra would know something has gone horribly wrong if all of their security officers are dead now, instead of those last 3 coming back to report.
Are you also referencing really quickly, MJ? Are you referencing the of discovering the tanks with Zack and Cloud where they were? Is that
No.
what you're referencing?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so
What
I
about
think
you, BBC?
I think it's Benora.
I think it's Benora.
Shut your
Okay,
mouth.
5 years
Shut
ago,
your mouth.
here's what the Japanese translation of that line is.
Well,
5
but
years
they weren't
ago,
in Benora 5 years ago, though. They were in Benora less than 1 year ago.
we came here together. Oh, that's true. That's true. That's true. He
No
didn't
fucking
know.
way.
That's true.
No
He said,
fucking way.
but he said 5 years ago we came here together, and that's the line. So I would have to be Nibelheim.
Okay, so here goes.
Oh, it could be Modeoheim too.
Well, possibly.
Okay, where do you think?
06.
I know. I actually do think it's Nibelheim, but the when does he say it is the actual question?
So
So
are you saying
I
whether it's
said-
the flashback or the him showing up at the party arriving at Nibelheim?
I should drop.
Neither. There's a third instance. So in Final Fantasy VII, other than kind of Tifa maybe humming in, or like the whole question about kind of Tifa, where were you 5 years ago? Well, the Junin parade kicks off, and she says, "Oh, I can't quite remember. It was 5 years ago," and then runs away. Right. The only
Right.
other time that they actually have the confrontation, the potential, are you saying I am an imposter confrontation, is at the Whirlwind Maze, where Sephiroth has the illusion of Nibelheim and Cloud sees Zack for the first time. Here, we came here 5 years ago during the illusion at Nibelheim in the Whirlwind Maze. This is where these lines are from.
Well, good night, everybody.
So
Thanks
yeah.
for the stream.
Interesting.
Wow.
All
That's
right.
sick.
Oh boy.
We promised big brain chat. We've had a big
Yeah,
brain chat.
we have.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Okay, Torn BB, can you explain that more, MJ? So,
Okay, so basically in the original Final Fantasy VII, when the party gets to the Whirlwind Maze, Cloud and Tifa go off after they've fought Genova Death. They go off and the Sephiroth creates the illusion of the burning Nibelheim, and it's at this point that Sephiroth shows Cloud the photograph of Zack and Zack and Tifa and Sephiroth, and then shows the vision of Zack running out of the manor. And it's at this point that Cloud breaks, because Tifa all but confirms that what Sephiroth is showing them is actually the truth.
mm-hmm.
But there's a whole conversation that takes place during that illusion of, slowly but surely, Cloud starts to, his mind starts to fracture, and he's asking Tifa for support. So if we're talking about two lines here where Tifa and Cloud are having an argument, and Tifa says, I saw you die, are you calling me an imposter?
Mm-hmm.
And we're also in a situation where Cloud says, we were here 5 years ago. What happened to you? This, in the original Final Fantasy VII, this all started to happen, the first time we physically see Zack on screen is during this illusion at the Whirlwind Maze. So it would make sense that, as we've spoken about over the course of this chat, that we all reckon that Rebirth relates to the rebirth of Sephiroth, that the Northern Crater is where the game ends. It's where the party's going to be at their lowest, they're going to lose Cloud. It then would make sense that over the course of Rebirth, with Zack being a player, it finally comes to a head at the Whirlwind Maze where Cloud starts to remember Zack, and that's where it all goes wrong, and that's your climax of the game. In my opinion.
And what a way to end the show. Guys, you guys did great. Thank you so much, and please subscribe to all the stuff. Definitely join the Shinra Archaeology Department. Thank you so much, Kai, for being here. Thanks, Sleepezi.